They say family is priceless, but mine was appraised at exactly $1.2 million. That is the price my mother-in-law and her lawyer lover put on my life. When my daughter hugged her 8th birthday gift, I saw a cold third eye staring into my privacy, not a teddy bear. If you think monsters lurk outside, listen closely, because sometimes they sit at your dinner table. The horror is not the bear, but what it recorded in my bedroom that night. My name is Thomas Brown, and on the afternoon that my life began to unravel, I was standing over a stainless steel grill, flipping Wagyu beef burgers that cost more than my first car. I am 45 years old, a senior software engineer for a major tech firm, and to anyone looking over the fence of my manicured backyard in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, I was the picture of the American dream. It was a Saturday in late May, the kind of day where the sky is so aggressively blue it feels like a screensaver, and the air smells of charcoal-expensive perfume and freshly cut grass. We were celebrating the 8th birthday of my daughter Lily. The party was designed to be perfect. That was the operational word in our household design. Nothing just happened. Everything was curated. The balloons were not just multicolored. They were a specific pastel palette, chosen by my wife Rebecca to match the hydrangeas blooming along the fence line. The playlist drifting from the hidden outdoor speakers was an upbeat but non-intrusive jazz mix. Children were running through the sprinklers, their laughter piercing the humid air, while their parents stood in clusters, clutching stems of Pinot Grigio and discussing real estate prices or private school tuitions. Yet as I stood there, with the heat of the grill radiating against my chest, I felt a profound chilling sense of detachment. It was a sensation I had grown accustomed to over the last few years, like a low-frequency hum that never quite goes away. I felt less like the host and father, and more like a hired actor in a commercial for a life I could not actually afford to live. I looked at my hands gripping the spatula. They were steady, but my mind was vibrating with an anxiety I could not name. It was the feeling of walking on ice that you know is too thin, even though you cannot see the cracks yet. Rebecca was holding court near the patio doors. I watched her for a moment, analyzing her, as I would a complex line of code. She was beautiful objectively, and devastatingly so. Her blonde hair was swept up in a chignon that looked effortless but had taken 2 hours at the salon that morning. She was wearing a white sundress that caught the light, and she was laughing at something a neighbor said. It was her party laugh. I knew that laugh. It was a high tinkling sound that signaled social dominance, not amusement. Her eyes, however, were scanning the perimeter, never resting on one thing for too long and, certainly, never resting on me. I placed the burgers onto a serving platter and walked toward the main cluster of guests. The noise of the party seemed to dampen as I approached, or perhaps that was just my perception. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. Then the atmosphere shifted. It was a subtle change in barometric pressure that always announced the arrival of my mother-in-law Evelyn. She did not walk into a room. She invaded it. Evelyn was 62, but looked a well-preserved 50, thanks to a team of surgeons and a soul that had never been burdened by empathy. She swept through the side gate wearing a silk blouse that probably cost $4,000, and an expression that suggested the very air in my backyard was beneath her standards. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped forward to greet her. It was a ritualistic dance we performed. I would offer respect. She would offer a microscopic nod that barely acknowledged my existence. "Happy birthday to Lily," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes drifting over my world's best dad apron with undisguised distaste. She did not say hello. Instead, she looked past me, scanning the crowd until she found Rebecca. "Where is the champagne, Thomas?" she asked. Her voice was low, smooth, and cut like a razor. "It is barely 2 in the afternoon, but I suppose we need something to wash down the smoke." She made the smell of barbecue sound like a sanitation failure. I pointed toward the bar station I had set up, but she was already moving away, her heels clicking on the patio stones. I watched her greet the other guests. The transformation was instant. To them, she was the charming philanthropic matriarch. She touched arms, offered compliments, and laughed warmly. It was a masterclass in social manipulation. One absence hung heavy in the air, at least for me. My father-in-law, Arthur, was not there. Arthur had been a good man, a quiet man who had built the family business from the ground up before Evelyn and the board pushed him out. For the past year, he had been residing in an assisted living facility, supposedly due to a rapid onset of dementia. I had not been allowed to visit him in 3 months. Every time I asked, Evelyn or Rebecca would come up with an excuse. He was having a bad week. The doctors advised against stimulation. He would not recognize me anyway. I grabbed a bottle of water and drifted toward the edge of the patio, trying to make myself invisible. I found myself standing near a trellis of ivy, just out of sight of the main group. Evelyn was talking to Sarah Jenkins, the wife of a local bank manager. Their voices carried over the music. "It is just so hard on Rebecca," Evelyn was saying. Her voice was hushed, pitched perfectly to sound like a confidential secret, being shared among close friends. "You know how Thomas gets." I froze. The water bottle crunched in my grip. "How?" So Sarah asked, her tone dripping with morbid curiosity. Evelyn sighed, a long, tragic sound. "He has been struggling. The pressure at work, or so he says. But frankly, we are worried about his stability. He forgets things. He gets aggressive over nothing. We are trying to get him to see a specialist, but he is in such denial. It is like walking on eggshells. We just want to make sure Lily is safe." The blood drained from my face. Aggressive, unstable. I was the one who drove the carpools. I was the one who helped Lily with her math homework every night because Rebecca was too busy with her yoga retreats and charity galas. I had never raised a hand to anyone in my life. This was not just gossip. This was a narrative being constructed. I realized then that this was not the first time Evelyn had told this story. The sympathetic nods from the neighbors, the way people had been avoiding eye contact with me all afternoon, it all clicked into place. I was being painted as the volatile husband, the ticking time bomb. I wanted to storm over there and confront her, to demand she stop lying. But my analytical mind kicked in. If I went over there shouting, I would only prove her point. I would be the aggressive, unstable husband she was describing. It was a trap. A verbal snare laid out in broad daylight. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to find Rebecca. I needed to see her face, to see if she was part of this or if she was just another victim of her mother's bulldozing personality. I found my wife near the dessert table. She was not looking at the guests. She was looking at her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen with a speed and intensity that did not match the lazy afternoon vibe. Her brow was furrowed, a crack in the perfect mask. "Rebecca," I said, stepping closer. She jumped, nearly dropping the phone. She shoved it into the pocket of her dress, the screen going dark before I could see anything but not. Before I caught the contact name at the top of the chat thread. It was just 2 initials AM, Thomas. She snapped, her voice hissing. "Do not sneak up on me like that." "I was not sneaking," I said, keeping my voice level. "I just wanted to know if you heard what your mother is telling Sarah Jenkins. She is telling people I am mentally unstable." Rebecca's eyes darted to the left, then back to me. She did not look surprised. She looked annoyed that I had noticed. "She is just worried about you, Thomas." Rebecca said, her hand nervously touching her necklace. "You have been stressed lately. You have been working late hours. You are paranoid." "Paranoid," I repeated. "She is telling the neighbors I am a danger to our daughter." "Lower your voice," Rebecca whispered harshly. "Do not ruin Lily's day. We can talk about your issues later. Right now, Mom has a surprise for Lily. Just play along, please, for once. My issues." The gaslighting was so seamless, so practiced that for a split second I actually questioned myself. Had I been acting strange? No. I shook my head, clearing the fog. This was coordinated. Before I could press her further, a chime rang out. Evelyn was standing in the center of the lawn, clapping her hands for attention. The guests quieted down. The children stopped running. "Everyone, please," Evelyn announced, her face beaming with that terrifying benevolence. "It is time for the main event. Grandmama has a special gift for the birthday girl." Lily ran forward. Her face lit up with innocent excitement. I watched my daughter, my heart aching. She was the only pure thing in this entire toxic ecosystem. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was being mined. Two men from a delivery service wheeled a large box around the side of the house. It was wrapped in silver paper with a bow the size of a hubcap. Evelyn gestured for Lily to open it. Lily tore at the papers, squealing with delight. As the wrapping fell away, the collective gasp of the guests was audible. It was a teddy bear. But to call it a teddy bear was an understatement. It was a life-sized plush beast, standing nearly 5 feet tall. It was covered in fur the color of dark chocolate, incredibly dense and soft-looking. It sat on the grass, its paws resting on its knees, looking like a silent guardian. "Oh, Grandmama, it is beautiful," Lily screamed, throwing her small arms around the bear's massive midsection. I stepped closer, drawn by a magnetic pull of unease. The bear was impressive, certainly an imported luxury item that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. But there was something wrong about it. It was the eyes. Most teddy bears have button eyes or simple plastic discs that reflect light in a flat, lifeless way. This bear had glass eyes. They were large, dark, and incredibly realistic. They had depth. They seemed to catch the sunlight and absorb it rather than reflect it. I walked up to where Lily was hugging the bear. Rebecca was standing next to Evelyn, and for a brief second, I saw them exchange a look. It was not a look of shared familial joy. It was a look of confirmation, a nod of execution. "Daddy, look," Lily cried, looking up at me. "He is so soft." I crouched down, forcing a smile for my daughter. "He is amazing, sweetie," I said. I reached out to pat the bear's head. The fur was indeed soft, almost too soft, like synthetic silk. My hand brushed down the side of the bear's face, and my fingers grazed the left eye. I stopped. A jolt of electricity, cold and sharp, shot down my spine. It was not a literal electric shock, but the biological alarm system of a man who has spent 20 years working with hardware and microcircuitry. The temperature of the glass was wrong. It was too cold. But beneath the cold glass, for just a fraction of a second, I felt a faint, rhythmic vibration. It was imperceptible to anyone else. But to me, it felt like the hum of a processor fan or the pulse of a capacitor charging. I looked into that dark, glassy eye. It stared back at me. And in that moment, the eerie calm that had surrounded me all afternoon shattered. The sounds of the party, the jazz, the laughter, the clinking glasses faded into a dull roar. I was not looking at a toy. I was looking at a device. I pulled my hand back slowly, fighting the urge to rip the eye out of its socket, right there in front of everyone. I stood up and looked at Evelyn. She was watching me. Her smile was fixed, but her eyes were cold, calculating, and predatory. She knew. She was waiting for me to react. She wanted me to make a scene to prove her story about my instability true. I took a deep breath, swallowing the bile that had risen in my throat. I looked at Rebecca. She was texting again, her thumbs moving furiously. I forced my facial muscles into a mask of gratitude. "It is a wonderful gift, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were screaming. "Lily loves it." Evelyn's smile widened just a fraction. "I am so glad you think so, Thomas," she said. "I wanted to give her something that would watch over her, always." The double meaning hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. "Come on, Lily," I said, my voice gentle. "Let us take him inside. He looks like he needs a place to sit. As I lifted the bear, I noticed its weight. It was top-heavy. The head was heavier than the stuffing should allow. I carried the Trojan horse into my living room, the glass eyes bouncing with every step, staring at the ceiling, staring at my family, staring at me. The party continued outside. The meat was eaten, the wine was drunk, and the lies were spread. But inside the house, in the silence of the hallway, I set the bear down. I looked at it, and I knew with absolute certainty that the war had officially begun. They thought they were introducing a spy into my camp. They did not realize they had just handed the enemy's encryption key to a master hacker. I walked back outside to join the charade, leaving the bear sitting in the shadows. I grabbed a beer, smiled at Sarah Jenkins, and played the part of the happy father. But my mind was already racing, compiling a list of tools I would need once the sun went down. Tonight the sandcastle would crumble, and I would see exactly what was buried underneath. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 2 in the morning before the house finally settled into a heavy, suffocating silence. The last dishwasher cycle had finished, humming an hour ago, and the air conditioning system had clicked off, leaving the air stale and still. I lay in bed next to Rebecca, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. It was slow and deep, the sleep of the innocent, or perhaps the sleep of the remorseless. She was facing away from me, her phone clutched in her hand, even in slumber, glowing faintly every few minutes, with silent notifications that I could not read from my angle. I waited another 10 minutes to be absolutely certain. Then I slid out from under the duvet, my bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet. I did not look back at my wife. The woman I had married 7 years ago, the woman I had promised to protect and cherish, felt like a stranger, now a beautiful shell housing a hostile combatant. I crept down the hallway to Lily's room. The door was ajar. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of silver across her bed. She was curled up, a small mound under pink blankets, and there, sitting on a chair directly facing her bed, was the bear. In the dark, it looked even more grotesque. Its silhouette was bulky, imposing like a sentry guarding a prisoner cell. I moved effectively, lifting the bear with a grip that was firm enough to be secure, but gentle enough not to disturb the internal mechanism I knew was there. I carried it out of the room, closing the door softly behind me. I took the bear down to the basement to my sanctuary. I call it the Binary Fortress. It is a soundproofed, climate-controlled workspace where I handle my freelance coding projects and server maintenance. It is the only room in the house where Rebecca has no jurisdiction, mostly because she finds the hum of the server racks annoying and the lack of windows depressing. For me, it is the only place I can breathe. I placed the bear on my main workbench and turned on the overhead halogen lights. The sudden brightness made the bear's chocolate-colored fur look almost oily. The glass eyes stared ahead, blank and indifferent. I put on a pair of nitrile gloves. I was not treating this as a toy anymore. I was treating it as a crime scene. I reached into a drawer and pulled out my radio frequency signal detector, a handheld device I use to troubleshoot Wi-Fi interference for clients. I switched it on and slowly waved the wand over the bear's head. The device stayed silent near the ears. It stayed silent near the nose. But the moment I brought it within 3 inches of the left eye, the meter spiked into the red zone, emitting a frantic, high-pitched beep that I quickly silenced. There was a transmission, active, continuous. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. A simple nanny cam usually records to an SD card. It does not transmit a high-frequency signal like this unless someone is watching in real time, or the data is being uploaded to a cloud server instantaneously. I pulled over my stereo microscope, swinging the heavy arm into position. I adjusted the focus until the bear's left eye filled the monitor screen. Under 20 times magnification, the deception was revealed with terrifying clarity. The eye was not solid glass. It was a high-grade polymer, housing transparent to infrared light. Deep in the center of the pupil, masked by the darkness of the tint, was a lens. It was not a cheap, grainy spy store camera. I recognized the curvature of the glass. This was a wide-angle microlens capable of capturing 4K resolution video in low light. It was the kind of hardware used in high-end security systems or drone warfare, not children's toys. I carefully used a non-conductive probe to part the fur around the eye socket. There was no zipper, no seam. They had sewn the device inside and closed the bear up with professional stitching. I grabbed a scalpel. My hand hovered for a second. If I cut it open, they would know. But I needed to see the brain of this beast. I made a microscopic incision just large enough to insert a fiber optic camera probe. On my monitor, I navigated the probe through the stuffing. It looked like navigating through white clouds. Then I hit something hard, a black metal casing. I maneuvered the probe around to read the serial numbers on the chips. It was a custom logic board. It had a dedicated power management unit wired to a battery pack that was likely hidden in the bear's stomach, probably enough juice to run for weeks. But the piece that made my blood run cold was the GPS module. It was a military-grade tracking chip accurate to within 3 feet. Why would they need to track a teddy bear that was supposed to sit in a bedroom? Unless they expected me to take Lily and run. Unless they were building a map of my movements. I withdrew the probe and smoothed the fur back over the incision. It was invisible to the naked eye. I sat down at my main terminal. Physical inspection was over. Now came the digital interrogation. I fired up my network analyzer. I isolated the frequency the bear was transmitting on a narrow band in the 5 gigahertz range, usually reserved for industrial control systems to avoid consumer Wi-Fi interference. It took me 40 minutes to crack the handshake protocol. The encryption was decent standard AES 256, but the password was laughably weak, likely the default set by the technician who installed it. I bypassed it and intercepted the data packets. I watched the stream of code flowing across my screen. It was a live video feed. I could see myself on my own monitor looking down at the bear. The quality was crystal clear. I traced the destination IP address. I wanted to know who was on the other end of this line. I expected to see a server hosted by a generic security company. I was wrong. The data was being split. One stream was being pushed to a mobile device. I ran a quick trace on the device ID. It was an iPhone 15 Pro Max. The carrier registration pinged back to a familiar name, Evelyn Sterling. My mother-in-law was watching, but there was a second stream. This one was heavier, carrying not just the compressed video, but also the uncompressed audio and the GPS telemetry data. It was being routed to a secure private server located in downtown Chicago. I ran a WHOIS lookup on the domain owner. The cursor blinked for a second, then spat out the result: Vanguard Legal Partners, LLC. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking loudly in the silent room. Vanguard Legal. I knew that firm. They were sharks. They specialized in high-asset divorce cases and hostile corporate takeovers. They did not handle petty family disputes. They handled wars. This was not just a nosy mother-in-law wanting to spy on her son-in-law. This was a professional surveillance operation. They were building a case. My mind raced back over the last 6 months, replaying scenes that I had previously dismissed as marital friction. 3 weeks ago, Rebecca had spilled hot coffee on my laptop while I was finishing a critical project. I had shouted at her, not abusive, just frustrated. She had stood there, tears instantly welling up in her eyes, looking terrified. At the time, I felt guilty. Now I realized she had been standing in a very specific spot in the kitchen. If there was a camera hidden in the smoke detector or the alarm sensor, my reaction would have looked like unprovoked aggression. Last month, she had asked me to pick up Lily from school, but gave me the wrong time. I arrived an hour late, frantic. The school called Evelyn because I was unreachable. Rebecca had hidden my phone. When I finally got there, I was sweating, shouting at the administration about the miscommunication. Evelyn was there calm and collected, holding Lily's hand, looking at me with pity, while the teachers whispered. They were baiting me. They were poking the animal with a sharp stick, waiting for it to roar, and then filming the roar to show the world what a beast it was. The bear was just the latest eye, the most intimate one. They wanted audio of me in Lily's room. They wanted to catch me saying something that could be twisted. Maybe I am complaining about Evelyn. Maybe me raising my voice to get Lily to go to sleep. They were manufacturing a monster. I looked at the bear. A surge of pure, red-hot rage washed over me. I wanted to grab it by its furry legs and smash it against the concrete floor until the glass eyes shattered and the circuit boards cracked. I wanted to march upstairs, wake Rebecca up, and throw the electronic guts of this thing in her face. No, that is exactly what the unstable Thomas Brown would do. That is exactly what Vanguard Legal wanted. If I destroyed the bear, I would be destroying property. I would look paranoid. They would say I was hallucinating, that I tore apart a child's birthday gift in a fit of mania. I forced myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I was an engineer. I solved problems. You do not fix a bug by smashing the computer. You fix it by understanding the code and rewriting it. I turned away from the bear and opened a locked cabinet beneath my desk. Inside was my own stash of hardware equipment I had acquired over years of tinkering with home automation and security research. If they wanted a surveillance state, I would give them one. But I would be the one holding the master key. I spent the next 3 hours working with the precision of a diamond cutter. I took 4 pinhole camera's lenses, no wider than the head of a needle, and a spool of fiber optic cable. I left the basement and moved through the house like a shadow. I needed coverage in the critical kill zones, the kitchen, the living room, and the master bedroom. In the kitchen, I drilled a microscopic hole in the casing of the range hood. I ran the wire up through the ventilation shaft where it would never be found. This camera covered the island where we ate most of our meals. In the living room, I replaced a screw in the smoke detector with a camera disguised as a screw head. It had a wide-angle view of the entire ground floor. In the master bedroom, the most dangerous room of all, I hid a camera inside the housing of the television soundbar, pointing directly at the bed and the closet. I wired everything back to a hidden partition drive on my server in the basement. I set up a secure VPN that only I could access. I wrote a script to back up the footage to an encrypted cloud server in Switzerland every 10 minutes. If they smashed my computer, the evidence would still exist. I finished just as the sky outside the window began to turn the color of a bruised plum. Dawn was coming. I went back to the basement and looked at the bear one last time. I could disable it. I could loop a fake video feed of an empty room so they would see nothing. But that would make them suspicious. If the signal died, they would know I found it. No, the bear had to stay active. It had to be their false sense of security. I carried the bear back upstairs. My arms burned with fatigue, but my mind was razor sharp. I placed the bear back on the chair in Lily's room, exactly as I had found it. I adjusted the angle of the head so it was looking at the bed just as they wanted. I leaned in close to the bear's ear, whispering so softly that even the sensitive microphone might struggle to pick it up. "I see you, Evelyn," I breathed. I went back to my bedroom and slid under the covers next to Rebecca. She stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent. I looked at the back of her head. I felt a profound sadness, realizing that the person sleeping next to me was an enemy agent. But the sadness was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I would play the part. I would be the tired, stressed, slightly unhinged husband. I would let them think their trap was working. I would let them draw the noose tighter and tighter, unaware that I had already cut the rope. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I lay there, waiting for the sun to rise, ready to start the performance of my life. The game had changed. They were playing checkers with a man who had just rewritten the rules of chess. The silence in the house on Tuesday morning was different from the silence of the night. It was not the heavy, suffocating stillness of secrets being kept in the dark, but rather the hollow, echoing emptiness of a stage after the actors have left. Rebecca and Evelyn had departed at 9 in the morning for a full day package at the sanctuary, an exclusive day spa that cost more for a single session than most families spent on groceries in a month. They had made a show of inviting me, knowing full well I had a conference call with the Singapore team, a scheduling conflict they had likely verified by checking my shared calendar. The moment their Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, the clock started ticking. I had exactly 4 hours before they would return glowing with exfoliation and self-righteousness. I did not go to my office. Instead, I walked into the master bedroom. The air still smelled of Rebecca's perfume, a scent of jasmine and sandalwood that used to turn me on, but now just made my stomach turn over. Her personal laptop, a sleek, silver MacBook Air, was sitting on her vanity table closed. I sat down in the velvet chair she used while applying her makeup. I opened the laptop. The screen flared to life, demanding a password or a fingerprint. Rebecca was careful, but she was also a creature of habit. She used the same password for her social media accounts as she did for her banking, a variation of her childhood street name, and the year she won a beauty pageant. However, she had recently changed her system login. I did not panic. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive containing a bootable Linux distro with a suite of forensic tools. I was not trying to guess her password. I was bypassing the operating system entirely to access the raw file structure. Within 5 minutes, I was in. I began searching through her documents. I ignored the folders labeled with mundane titles like recipes or Lily School. I went straight for the hidden directories in the system library, the places a normal user would never look, but where someone trying to hide something might bury a folder. I found it nested deep inside a folder for printer drivers. It was a directory simply named Project Willow. I clicked it open and my breath hitched in my throat. The first file was a PDF titled Petition for Involuntary Conservatorship. I opened it, my eyes scanning the legal jargon. It was a draft fully filled out, waiting only for a date and a signature. The petitioner was Rebecca Brown. The respondent was me, Thomas Brown. The document laid out a case for my immediate institutionalization. It cited acute paranoia, violent mood swings, inability to manage financial affairs, and disconnect from reality. It listed specific incidents that were twisted versions of reality. The time I yelled about the coffee spill was listed as unprovoked rage episode. The time I was late picking up Lily because they gave me the wrong time was listed as memory lapse and child endangerment. They were not just planning to divorce me. They were planning to erase me. They wanted to strip me of my legal rights, my autonomy, and my voice. I scrolled down to the proposed treatment facility, Willow Creek Behavioral Health Center. The name sounded familiar. I quickly opened a browser window and ran a search on the facility. It was a high-end private psychiatric hospital, about 2 hours north of the city. I dug into the corporate filings. The board of directors list was public record. There, halfway down the list, was a holding company, Sterling Associates. That was Evelyn's family investment firm. They owned a 15% stake in the very prison they intended to throw me into. This was vertical integration of the most horrific kind. They would lock me up in a facility they profited from paying for my treatment with my own money. I went back to the Project Willow folder. There was a subfolder named Arthur. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it. Inside were medical reports dated 14 months ago. I began to read and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My father-in-law, Arthur, had not developed dementia overnight as we had been told. The reports from Willow Creek, the same facility, showed that upon admission, his cognitive functions were normal. He was lucid. He was oriented. There was a series of emails between Evelyn and the chief administrator of Willow Creek, a Dr. Eris Thorne. Email from Evelyn. He is becoming difficult about the stock transfer. We need to increase the dosage of the sedative. He needs to be compliant by the shareholder meeting next week. Reply from Dr. Thorne. Understood. We will adjust the cocktail. He will not be in a state to object. I felt sick. Arthur was not sick. He was a political prisoner. They had drugged him into submission to seize control of the family manufacturing business. I had watched him deteriorate over the last year, thinking it was a cruel twist of nature. It was not nature. It was chemical warfare. And I was the next target. I closed the file, my hands shaking with rage. I needed to know who else was involved. I went to the photo library. Rebecca had a hidden album, protected by a secondary PIN code, but the forensic software rendered the PIN useless. The album was named Vanguard. I expected to see legal documents. Instead, I saw flesh. Hundreds of photos. Rebecca and a man I recognized instantly from the metadata on the teddy bear feed, Adrian Miller, the lawyer. A.M. They were not just selfies. They were explicit pornographic images taken in hotel rooms, in cars, and my stomach lurched in my own living room. There was a photo of them on the beige sofa downstairs, time-stamped 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday, when I was at the office. I stared at the face of Adrian Miller. He was handsome in a slick, predatory way, with hair that looked like it had been sculpted by aerodynamics and a smile that reeked of arrogance. He was the partner at Vanguard Legal. He was the one orchestrating the legal strategy to destroy me. He was sleeping with my wife while drafting the paperwork to declare me incompetent. I checked the timestamp of the first photo. 6 months ago. The affair had started right around the time Rebecca began gaslighting me about my memory. I navigated to the financial records. I opened the Quicken file she kept locally. I pulled up our joint savings account, the one we had been contributing to for 10 years, the nest egg for a vacation home in Lily's college fund. Balance $0.00. I checked the transaction history. 2 months ago, there was a single wire transfer for $350,000. The recipient was a shell company in the Cayman Islands. They had cleaned me out. If I was declared incompetent tomorrow, I would go in with nothing, and the court would appoint Rebecca to manage my remaining assets, which were non-existent. But why? That was the question that nagged at me. Why go to this extreme length? Why the complex surveillance, the gaslighting, the forced institutionalization? If Rebecca wanted a divorce, she could get one. We had a prenup, but it was fair. She would get half. Why did they need to destroy me completely? Why did they need total control over my legal personhood? I went back to the file structure. I searched for my own name, Thomas Brown. I found a scanned document in the Project Willow folder that did not fit with the others. It was an old yellowed letterhead from a law firm in Boston, dated 20 years ago. It was a notification of a testamentary trust established by my grandfather, Jonathan Brown. I stared at the screen, confused. My grandfather had been a modest watchmaker. He died when I was in college. I thought he had left me his tools and a few $1,000s, which I used to buy my first car. I read the legal text. Beneficiary Thomas Jonathan Brown shall receive the full principal and accrued interest of the blind trust upon his 46th birthday, provided he is of sound mind and legal capacity. I looked at the principal amount listed 20 years ago, $8 million. My jaw dropped. My grandfather had invested in early tech stocks in the 80s and 90s, companies like Microsoft and Apple, and had locked the shares away in a trust to compound untouched, until I was mature enough to handle it. I did a quick calculation of compound interest and stock splits over 20 years. That trust was not worth $8 million anymore. It was likely worth upwards of $40 million. And my 46th birthday was in 3 weeks. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That was the timeline. That was why everything was escalating now. If I turned 46 and was a free man, I would inherit $40 million. But if I was declared mentally incapacitated before my birthday, the control of that trust would fall to my legal guardian, Rebecca, and through her, Evelyn and Adrian. They did not just want my house or my savings. They were hunting a whale. They had somehow found out about the trust, probably through Adrian's legal connections, or by intercepting mail I never saw, and had built this entire machine to intercept the fortune. If I was in Willow Creek, drugged out of my mind like Arthur, they would have power of attorney. They would drain the trust, launder the money through their shell companies, and leave me to rot in a padded room until I died. I closed the laptop. My hands were no longer shaking. A cold, steely calm settled over me. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was a heist. A $40 million heist with my life as the collateral damage. I wiped the logs of my access, shut down the laptop, and placed it exactly as I had found it. I walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove. I needed to be away from the cameras. I needed a safe zone. I drove to a rundown diner on the south side of the city, a place with sticky floors and coffee that tasted like battery acid. I sat in a booth in the back and dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. Marcus King. We had gone to law school together before I dropped out to pursue engineering. Marcus had stayed. He was not a fancy corporate lawyer like Adrian Miller. Marcus was a pit bull. He specialized in men's rights and aggressive defense against false allegations. He was the kind of lawyer other lawyers hated because he did not play golf. He played for blood. He picked up on the third ring. "Thomas, you are alive. I need you, Marcus," I said, my voice low. "I need you to clear your schedule. What is going on?" "I am being framed for insanity," I said. "And there is a $40 million trust fund involved." There was a silence on the other end. Then I heard the sound of a chair scraping, as if he was sitting up straighter. "Talk to me," Marcus said. I told him everything. The bear, the cameras, the drafts I found on the computer, the affair, Arthur. When I finished, Marcus let out a low whistle. "They are trying to execute a granny snatching play. But on a husband," Marcus said. "It is a conservatorship trap. Like what they did to Britney Spears, but darker. If they get a judge to sign that emergency order, you are toast. You lose your rights instantly. You cannot hire a lawyer. You cannot access your money. You cannot testify." "What do I do?" I asked. "We need to counter-ambush," Marcus said. "We need to prove you are sane, and we need to prove they are the conspirators. But we cannot just show the judge a hidden camera video. We need to catch them in the act of fraud. We need to make them perjure themselves." "I have a plan," I said. "Tell me." "I am going to act crazy," I said. "I am going to give them exactly what they want. I am going to accelerate their timeline." "Thomas, that is dangerous," Marcus warned. "I know," I said, "but I need them to feel confident. I need them to file that petition. Because once they file it, and I prove it is based on lies, it is malicious prosecution. It is fraud. It is prison time for them." I paused, looking out the window at the gray street. "And Marcus, I need you to find out everything you can about Dr. Eris Thorne at Willow Creek. If we take him down, the whole house of cards falls." "I am on it," Marcus said. "Watch your back, Thomas. These people are not family anymore. They are hostiles." I hung up. I sat there for a moment, finishing my bitter coffee. I was the heir to a fortune I never knew existed, targeted by a wife I thought loved me, monitored by a mother-in-law who wanted me dead. I checked my watch. 1 hour until they returned from the spa. I stood up, threw a $20 bill on the table, and walked out. I had a performance to prepare for. If they wanted a madman, I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. But the final act would not be written by them. It would be written by me, and it would end with the click of handcuffs, not the closing of a hospital door. The war for my sanity began not with a scream, but with a vitamin supplement. For the next 3 days, the atmosphere in my house shifted from icy tension to a suffocating orchestrated madness. It was psychological warfare, designed with the precision of a circuit board intended to dismantle my reality piece by piece until I no longer trusted my own mind. They called it gaslighting, but that word feels too clinical, too trendy for what they were doing. They were not just dimming the lights. They were actively rewriting the code of my existence. It started on Wednesday morning. I walked into the kitchen, my head pounding from lack of sleep and the constant vigilance of monitoring the hidden camera feeds. Rebecca was standing by the island, pouring orange juice. She looked radiant, a stark contrast to the hollowed-out wreck I felt like. "Here," she said, sliding a small ceramic dish toward me. "You forgot to take your multivitamin yesterday. You look exhausted, Thomas. You need to take care of yourself." I looked at the pill. It was the same oval yellow tablet I had taken every morning for 5 years. Or at least it looked like it. I picked it up. To the naked eye, it was identical. But I am a creature of patterns and details. The texture felt slightly more chalky. The embossed logo on the side was a fraction of a millimeter shallower than usual. I popped the pill into my mouth, took a swig of juice, and pretended to swallow. I felt the tablet slide to the back of my throat, but I caught it with the base of my tongue hiding it there. "Thanks," I mumbled. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and spat the pill into a tissue. I wrapped it up and put it in my pocket. Later, in the safety of my basement fortress, I would analyze it. I did not need a mass spectrometer to guess the result. When I ran a basic solubility test and tasted a microscopic fragment, the bitterness was unmistakable. It was not a vitamin. It was a benzodiazepine, likely a generic form of Xanax or Ativan crushed and repressed into a mold to look like my supplement. They were drugging me. They wanted me sedated, confused, and slow. They wanted the Thomas who would slur his words in front of neighbors, the Thomas who would stumble and drop things, the Thomas who would look exactly like the unstable, drug-dependent maniac they were describing in their legal petitions. I realized then that I had to play the role. If I stayed sharp, they would increase the dosage or try something more drastic. I had to let them think the poison was working. So for the rest of the week, I became an actor in my own tragedy. I moved slower. I let my eyelids droop. I deliberately slurred my speech during dinner. "Honey, are you okay?" Rebecca asked that evening, her voice dripping with fake concern as I knocked over a glass of water. I stammered, blinking slowly. "I feel so heavy. My head is spinning." Evelyn, sitting across the table, exchanged a quick, satisfied glance with Rebecca. It was a micro-expression gone in an instant, but my hidden camera in the smoke detector caught it in high definition. "You should rest, Thomas," Evelyn said, slicing her steak with surgical precision. "You are clearly not well. Perhaps it is the stress, or maybe you are taking something you should not be." The accusation was subtle, planted like a seed. The next phase of their attack was an assault on my memory. On Thursday morning, I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door exactly where I always left them, except they were not there. I searched the floor. I searched my pockets. Nothing. Rebecca walked in holding a basket of laundry. "What are you looking for, my keys?" I said. "I hung them right here last night." "No, you did not," she said, shaking her head with a pitying smile. "You left them in the refrigerator, Thomas, next to the milk, again." I froze. I stared at her. I knew for a fact I had not done that. "Check the fridge," she urged, her tone gentle, like she was speaking to a toddler. I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door. There, sitting on the middle shelf, chilled and covered in condensation, were my keys. For a second, a terrifying second, I questioned myself. The drug, even the small amount I had absorbed, could it be affecting me? But then, I remembered the footage. I had reviewed the overnight tapes from the kitchen camera at 4 a.m. I had seen Rebecca come downstairs at 2 a.m, take the keys from the hook, and place them in the fridge. I looked at her. She was watching me closely, waiting for the crack in my armor. God, I muttered, rubbing my face. I must be losing my mind. She walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. It is okay, we all forget things. But, Thomas, it is happening more often. Maybe Mom is right. Maybe you need to see someone at Willow Creek, just for an evaluation. The trap was closing. They were using my manufactured incompetence to push the narrative of institutionalization. But the most painful part was not the drugs or the missing keys. It was Lily. They were weaponizing my daughter against me. On Friday afternoon, I was in the basement, listening to the audio feed from the living room. Lily was sitting on the floor coloring, and Evelyn was sitting in the armchair knitting. It looked like a wholesome domestic scene, but the audio told a horror story. Lily, sweetie, Evelyn said softly. Has Daddy been acting strange around you lately? Lily paused her coloring. Strange, how like forgetting your name, or yelling at things that aren't there, Evelyn suggested. No, Lily said. Daddy is just sleepy. Well, Evelyn continued, leaning forward. Daddy is sick in his head, darling. Sometimes sick, people do bad things without meaning to. If Daddy ever scares you or if he says anything weird, you have to tell Grandma or Mommy immediately. Okay, it is our secret. Why is Daddy sick? Lily asked, her voice trembling slightly. Because he does not love us enough to get better, Evelyn lied. Her voice was smooth, confident venom. But do not worry. We are going to send him somewhere where doctors can fix him. But until then, if the police ever come, and they might just to check on us, you need to tell them that Daddy yells a lot. Can you do that for Grandma? I sat in my chair, my hands gripping the armrests so hard the leather groaned. I wanted to vomit. She was coaching an 8-year-old child to perjure herself. She was planting memories of abuse that had never happened. I needed a way to counter this. The cameras in the house were good, but they were static. I needed a witness that could move with Lily, something that could protect her when she was out of my sight. I looked at the workbench where Lily's broken smartwatch lay. She had cracked the screen a month ago. I had promised to fix it. I spent the next 6 hours rebuilding it. I replaced the screen, but I also swapped out the firmware. I installed a custom kernel that bypassed the parental controls and the standard operating system. I inserted a high-gain microphone and a secondary battery cell. I programmed the watch to record audio continuously on a 24-hour loop, uploading the encrypted chunks to my private server whenever it connected to a known Wi-Fi network. I also added a panic feature. If Lily pressed the side button 3 times, it would silently alert my phone and start a live audio stream. I gave it to her that evening. Here you go, Bug, I said, fastening it around her small wrist. Good as new. Thanks, Daddy, she beamed, hugging me. I held her tight, feeling the fragility of her small frame. I whispered in her ear. Listen to me, Lily. This watch is special. It is a super-secret spy watch. Only you and I know about it. Never take it off, okay, even if Grandma says so. She nodded, eyes wide with the thrill of a secret mission. I promise. I hoped it would be enough. Saturday was the turning point, the day the violence shifted from psychological to physical, but not in the way anyone would expect. I was in the garage pretending to look for a tool I did not need when my phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from the master bedroom camera. I pulled up the feed. Rebecca was standing in front of the full-length mirror. She was wearing a tank top. She held a heavy brass candlestick holder in her right hand, one we had received as a wedding gift. I watched frozen in horror as she raised the heavy brass object. She took a deep breath, squeezed her eyes shut, and slammed the heavy base of the candlestick into her own left upper arm. She did not scream. She just gasped a sharp intake of air through gritted teeth. She looked at the red mark forming on her skin. It was not dark enough. She hit herself again, harder. This time, the sound of metal impacting flesh was sickeningly loud over the audio feed. She dropped the candlestick on the bed and grabbed her arm, tears springing to her eyes. Real pain. But beneath the pain, her face was set in a grim mask of determination. She waited a few minutes for the swelling to start. Then she picked up her phone. She held her arm out, angling it to catch the light, and snapped 3 photos. She typed a caption. I zoomed in on the video feed to read the screen. He grabbed me again. I am so scared. I do not know how much more I can take. She sent the message. My phone buzzed again a moment later. It was an intercepted text notification. The recipient of her photo was Adrian Miller. His reply came 30 seconds later. Perfect. This is the evidence of physical volatility we needed for the emergency ex-parte order. The judge will sign it immediately. We move on him next week. I lowered my phone, my heart racing like a piston engine. They were going to frame me for domestic abuse. They were going to use these self-inflicted wounds to get a restraining order, kick me out of my own house, and then drag me to Willow Creek in handcuffs. I walked back into the house, my legs feeling shaky, but my mind crystal clear. I found Rebecca in the kitchen, icing her arm. She was wearing a long-sleeved sweater now. What happened? I asked, pointing to the ice pack. Oh, nothing, she said, avoiding my eyes. I just bumped into the door frame. You know how clumsy I am. The lies were effortless now. I went to my study and locked the door. I needed to check the deadlines. If they were filing for an emergency order based on imminent danger, they would do it soon. I accessed the back end of Rebecca's email again. I found a new thread with Adrian. Subject: Timeline Acceleration, Adrian. The judge is golfing with me on Sunday. I will show him the photos then. We will file the motion Monday morning. We need to have the transport team ready to pick Thomas up by Tuesday evening. We cannot risk him making it to Friday. Rebecca. Why, what is Friday? Adrian, Friday is his birthday, Rebecca. If he turns 46 and is not in custody, the trust fund vests $40 million. If he accesses that money, he can hire an army of lawyers. We have to resolve him before Friday. Resolve him. The language was chilling. They were not talking about a person. They were talking about a problem to be deleted. I looked at the calendar. Today was Saturday. I had 3 days. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. On Tuesday evening, a van from Willow Creek would arrive. Men in white coats would step out. The police would be there to enforce the court order. I would be sedated, strapped to a gurney, and driven away. And once I was inside those walls under the care of Dr. Thorne, I would never be lucid enough to speak to a judge again. I had 72 hours to turn the table. I picked up the small earpiece I used to monitor the house audio. I heard a noise from the living room. It was the sound of the front door opening. Adrian Miller walked in. He did not knock. He walked in like he owned the place. Rebecca ran to him. They embraced right there in the hallway beneath the family photos of me and Lily. He kissed her a hungry, possessive kiss. Did he take the pills? Adrian asked, pulling away. Every day, Rebecca confirmed. He is a zombie. He barely knows what day it is, good Adrian said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. These are the final papers. You need to sign the affidavit stating that you fear for your life and the life of your daughter. Rebecca took the pen without hesitation. I watched on the monitor as she signed my life away. I recorded it all. The kiss, the admission about the pills, the signing of the fraudulent affidavit. It was enough evidence to send them to prison for 20 years. But it was not enough to save me yet. Because if they filed that order on Monday morning, the system would crush me before I could present the evidence. The courts move slow, but emergency protective orders move fast. By the time a judge looked at my hard drive, I would already be lobotomized by chemical restraints. I needed to stop the filing. I needed to blow up their plan before Monday morning. I leaned back in my chair. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard determination. I was an engineer. I knew how to build systems, but I also knew how to overload them. I looked at the screen where Adrian was laughing, pouring himself a glass of my scotch. "Enjoy it, Adrian," I whispered. "It is the last drink you will ever have as a free man." I reached for my phone and dialed Marcus. "It is time," I said. "They are moving on Tuesday. We launch the counterstrike tomorrow. Sunday would not be a day of rest. It would be the day the hunter realized he had walked into the lion's den." I checked the battery level on Lily's watch. 98%. The recording light was blinking steady in red. A silent heartbeat. I closed my eyes and let the darkness of the room swallow me. The victim, Thomas Brown, was dead. He died the moment he saw that camera in the bear's eye. The man sitting in the chair now was something else entirely, and he was ready to burn the whole world down to save his daughter. Monday arrived with a metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth. I drove to Aerodynamics Incorporated. At 7 in the morning, merging into the commuter traffic of the I-90, with the grim determination of a soldier deploying to a war zone. My workplace was a sprawling glass and steel complex that handled defense contracts for aerospace guidance systems. It was a fortress of biometrics and firewalls, a place where security clearance was currency. And today, my wife was coming to breach it. I had intercepted a calendar invite on Rebecca's phone the night before. It was innocent enough on the surface, surprise visit to Thomas, bring office treats. But I knew better. The timing was too precise. It was exactly 24 hours before the legal deadline to have me detained. They needed one final nail in the coffin. They needed to frame me not just as unstable but as criminal. If the mental health angle failed, they wanted a federal espionage charge as a backup plan. I sat at my desk in the open plan office, surrounded by 3 monitors. On the center screen, I had my standard coding environment. On the left screen, hidden behind a spreadsheet, was a live diagnostic tool, monitoring the USB ports of my machine. At 10:30 in the morning, I saw her. Rebecca walked off the elevator, carrying a white bakery box, tied with a satin ribbon. She was wearing a navy blue dress that screamed, "Supportive corporate wife." She smiled at the receptionist, waved at my colleagues, and played the role perfectly. "Thomas," she called out, her voice, bright and cheery. "I brought croissants from that bakery you love." My stomach churned. I stood up, forcing a smile that felt like it was carved out of wood. "Becky, what a surprise," I said. "You did not have to do this." "I was in the neighborhood running errands for Mom," she said, setting the box down on my desk. She leaned in to kiss my cheek. I smelled her expensive perfume, but beneath it, I smelled the faint metallic scent of fear. Her pulse was visible in her neck. She was nervous. "Go ahead, open them," she urged, gesturing to the box. "I will just check my email while you pass them out. My phone is dead." "Do you mind if I use your computer for a quick second?" There it was. The vector. I looked at her. A normal husband would say yes. A normal husband would trust his wife. "Of course," I said. "I will go grab some napkins from the break room." I typed in my password to unlock the screen, then stepped away. As I walked toward the kitchenette, I did not look back. I did not need to. I pulled out my phone and opened the remote desktop app I had configured specifically for this moment. I watched the screen of my phone. I saw Rebecca's hand reach into her purse. She did not pull out a phone. She pulled out a small, flat flash drive. It was matte black, designed to be unobtrusive. She plugged it into the rear USB port of my tower, hidden by the bakery box. On my phone screen, I saw the drive mount, Drive E connected. Immediately, a script auto-executed. It was a nasty piece of work. I recognized the signature instantly. It was a rootkit designed to siphon classified schematics and upload them to an encrypted foreign server. If that upload completed, I would be flagged by the NSA within minutes. I would be arrested for treason. But Rebecca, and whoever the technical consultant was that Adrian had hired, had made a fatal error. They underestimated me. They were trying to hack a senior systems architect on his own turf. The moment the drive connected, my defensive protocol kicked in. I had set up a honeypot, a virtual machine that looked exactly like my real desktop, but was actually a sandboxed prison completely isolated from the company network. The malware thought it was stealing the guidance system blueprints for the new Raptor drone. In reality, it was downloading 3 gigabytes of useless dummy data I had generated over the weekend, mostly corrupted text files and high-resolution pictures of my middle finger. More importantly, my system was silently copying the source code of the malware and tracing its origin. It was logging the keystrokes. It was recording the webcam footage of Rebecca's face as she watched the progress bar. I stood in the break room, counting to 60. I needed to give her enough time to think she had succeeded. I watched on my phone as the upload finished. She yanked the drive out, slipped it back into her purse, and stood up smoothing her dress. I walked back to my desk holding a stack of napkins. "All done?" I asked. "Yes, thanks, honey," she said, flashing a dazzling guilty smile. "Just had to send a quick file to the printer for Mom." I looked at the computer. It was sitting there innocent and compromised. "Well, thanks for the croissants," I said. "I better run," she said, grabbing her purse a little too tightly. "Adrian, the interior designer is meeting us at the house at noon." She had slipped. She said, "Adrian." I walked her to the elevator. I kissed her cheek. "Drive safe," I said. As the doors closed, her smile dropped instantly. I saw the relief wash over her face. She thought the job was done. She thought I was a dead man walking. I did not go back to my desk immediately. I went to the window overlooking the parking lot. I pulled out my phone and accessed the live feed from my car's dash cam, which was parked in the front row. I zoomed in. Rebecca walked out of the building. A black BMW sedan was idling in the handicap spot, illegal, arrogant, typical. The window rolled down. It was Adrian Miller. Rebecca leaned into the window. She did not just talk to him. She handed him the flash drive. Then, right there in the daylight in the parking lot of a defense contractor, she leaned in and kissed him. It was a kiss of celebration, a victory lap. I saved the video clip to my secure cloud server. The chain of custody was complete. I had her planting the device, and I had her handing it to the mastermind. I returned to my desk ready to analyze the malware payload, but I never got the chance. 10 minutes later, my internal phone rang. Brown, my office. Now. It was Mr. Vance, the director of operations. I walked into his corner office. Vance was a heavy-set man with a flushed face and a reputation for gambling debts. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, refusing to look me in the eye. 2 security guards were standing in the corner. "Shut the door," Vance grunted. I closed it. "What is this about, sir? We have detected irregular activity on your workstation," Vance said, reading from a script on his desk. An unauthorized external device was connected. Security protocols were breached. I stared at him. The breach had happened into a sandbox. No actual company data was touched. The only way he would know about it this fast before an automated audit was if he was tipped off. "I can explain," I said calmly. It was a contained environment. "I was testing a save-it," Vance snapped. "We cannot take risks with national security, Brown. You know the policy. 0 tolerance." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a suspension notice. Without pay. Effective immediately. "We are pending a full federal investigation," Vance said. "Until then, you are stripped of your clearance. Escort him out." I looked at Vance's wrist. He was wearing a brand new Rolex Submariner. A gold one. It looked distinctively like the kind of gift Evelyn Sterling gave to business partners she owned. I understood the play. This wasn't about the malware succeeding. This was about cutting off my resources. They knew the malware might fail or take time to be discovered. The suspension was the immediate kill shot. If I had no job, no income, and was under federal investigation, my credibility in family court the next day would be 0. A judge would never grant custody to an unemployed father suspected of treason. I did not fight. I did not argue. I simply nodded. "Understood," I said. I allowed the guards to escort me to my desk. I packed a small cardboard box with my personal items, a framed photo of Lily, a stress ball, and my coffee mug. I left the computer. I did not need it. I had the mirror image on my server at home. As I walked out of the building holding my box of shame, I felt the eyes of my coworkers on me. They whispered. They thought I was a traitor. I walked to my car, threw the box in the passenger seat, and started the engine. I drove 3 miles to a nondescript public park. I parked in the back away from the jogging paths. I pulled a burner phone from my glove box. It was a cheap, prepaid flip phone I had bought with cash 2 days ago. I dialed a number I had memorized. "Agent Ross," I said, when the line clicked open. "Thomas." The voice on the other end was rough, confused. "Why are you calling me on an unlisted line? I am cashing in the chip, Ross," I said. "Remember Jakarta. Remember who decrypted the server logs that saved your career." There was a pause. "I am listening." "I just walked out of aerodynamics," I said. "I have been suspended." "They are going to flag me for data theft. Did you do it?" Ross asked sharply. "No, but my wife did. And I have the logs to prove it." I explained the honeypot. I explained the flash drive. I told him about the malware signature. "If that malware is what I think it is," Ross said, his voice dropping an octave, "then this is not just a domestic dispute, Thomas. That is foreign state-level code. If your wife is distributing that, she is an unregistered foreign agent, knowingly or not." "She is a pawn," I said. "The handler is a lawyer named Adrian Miller, and the financier is Evelyn Sterling." I heard the sound of a keyboard clacking on the other end. "I am opening a file," Ross said. "But Thomas, if they flagged you, the Bureau is already generating a warrant. I can stall them, but I cannot stop them if the company presses charges." "I do not need you to stop them," I said. "I need you to let them run. I need you to track the data from that flash drive. When Adrian plugs it in, I want you to be there." "I need probable cause," Ross said. "I will get you probable cause, I promised. Just be ready." I hung up and destroyed the SIM card. I sat in the car and opened my laptop. Not my work one, but my personal rig I kept in the trunk. I connected to the public Wi-Fi of a nearby coffee shop using a signal booster. It was time for the final financial maneuver. I logged into the offshore account I had set up weeks ago under the name Phoenix Consulting. It was a ghost entity. I accessed my actual bank accounts, the ones that Rebecca and Adrian thought were empty. They were empty of cash, yes, but they had missed the crypto assets. Years ago, I had bought thousands of Bitcoin when they were trading for pennies, stored on a cold storage hardware wallet that looked like a garage door opener. I plugged the key in. The balance loaded. It was a number that would make Evelyn Sterling choke on her caviar. I initiated a tumbling protocol, breaking the assets into thousands of microtransactions and routing them through a mixer service to wash the trail. The destination was a new trust, irrevocable and untouchable, set up in Lily's name, with me as the sole trustee domiciled in a jurisdiction that did not recognize U.S. civil forfeiture judgments. Then I did something petty but necessary. I hacked into the payroll system of Vanguard Legal. It was surprisingly easy. For a law firm, their security was archaic. I did not steal money. I simply adjusted the tax withholding settings for Adrian Miller and every other partner to 0%. Then I set up an automated script to email their entire client list a link to a secure whistleblower Dropbox I had created. I was burning the bridge, but I was also building a raft. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rebecca. "Honey, I heard what happened. Mr. Vance called me. I am so sorry. Come home, we can figure this out." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was the one who plunged the knife in, and now she wanted to be the one to bandage the wound, just so she could hold me still for the final execution. I typed a reply. "I am devastated. Going to clear my head. We'll be home for dinner." I put the car in gear. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the city. I was unemployed. I was a suspect in a federal espionage case. My family was hunting me, but as I drove out of the park, I felt lighter than I had in years. They had stripped away Thomas Brown, the engineer, Thomas Brown, the husband Thomas Brown, the nice guy. All that was left was the father, and he was a very dangerous man. The trap at Aerodynamics had sprung, but the animal was not in it. The animal was circling back to the hunter's house, and he was bringing the fire with him. The Friday morning sky was the color of a fresh bruised purple, and gray hanging low over the suburbs of Chicago. It was the kind of weather that felt heavy in your lungs, pressing down on the world with a suffocating weight. Inside my house, the air was even heavier. Rebecca stood in the kitchen packing a wicker basket with artisanal cheeses and grapes. She was wearing a trench coat and large sunglasses despite the gloom outside. Lily was sitting at the table looking small and confused, clutching the strap of her backpack. "We are going to the lake house for the weekend," Rebecca announced, not looking at me. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. "Mom thinks it would be good for Lily to get some fresh air." Away from the tension here, I stood by the coffee machine, gripping my mug with both hands to hide the fact that they were perfectly steady. I was supposed to be the medicated, trembling wreck they had created. "That sounds nice," I said, forcing my voice to sound hollow and distant. "Maybe I should come. I could drive." "No," Rebecca snapped too quickly. Then she softened a performance that was beginning to fray at the edges. "No, honey. You need to rest. You have had a hard week with the job suspension and everything. Stay here. Sleep. We will be back on Sunday." I looked at her. I saw the lie sitting behind her eyes like a coiled snake. They were not coming back on Sunday. Or rather, I would not be here when they returned. This was the extraction. They were clearing the civilians from the blast zone. Once Rebecca and Lily were safe at the isolated villa in Lake Geneva, the police, or worse, the orderlies from Willow Creek, would come for me. They would find me alone, agitated, perhaps holding a weapon they had planted, and that would be the end. "Okay," I whispered, looking down at the floor. "Kiss Lily for me." I watched them leave. I watched my wife buckle our daughter into the back of the Mercedes. I watched them pull out of the driveway. The moment the taillights disappeared around the corner, the trembling stopped. The fog in my eyes cleared. I ran to the garage. I did not take my car. They would be tracking the GPS. Instead, I pulled the tarp off my old motorcycle, a dusty Ducati I had not ridden in 3 years. I had disabled its transponder months ago. I threw a black duffel bag over my shoulder. Inside was my laptop, a high-frequency directional antenna, and my drone. I kicked the engine to life. It roared, a sound of pure mechanical aggression that matched the fire burning in my gut. I did not need to guess where they were going. The lake house was a sprawling Victorian estate on the edge of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, about 2 hours north. It belonged to the Sterling Family Trust. It was secluded, surrounded by dense pine forests, and accessible only by a single gravel road. It was the perfect place to hide a family, or to stage a tragedy. I kept a distance of 2 miles, tracking the Mercedes, via the signal from Lily's watch. I rode hard, weaving through the traffic, the wind biting through my jacket. When I reached the perimeter of the estate, I killed the engine and pushed the bike into the underbrush covering it with pine boughs. I continued on foot, moving through the woods like a ghost. I was wearing dark, tactical gear, blending into the shadows of the trees. I reached a ridge overlooking the property. The house sat there, imposing and silent, its dark windows looking like empty eye sockets. The Mercedes was parked in the driveway, but it was not alone. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked next to it. I crouched behind a fallen log and unzipped my bag. I pulled out my drone, a custom-built quadcopter with silent rotors and a long-range thermal camera. I launched it, guiding it up through the tree canopy until it hovered 200 feet above the house. I stared at the tablet screen, strapped to my forearm. The thermal feed showed heat signatures. There were 5 people in the house. 2 were small and feminine, Rebecca and Lily. They were in the kitchen area. 3 were male. One was pacing in the living room. The heat signature profile matched Adrian Miller's height and build. But the other 2 men were unknown. They were large, standing stationary by the front and back doors. Sentries. I switched the drone to optical zoom. Through the living room window, I saw Adrian. He was not wearing his usual bespoke suit. He was wearing jeans and a leather jacket. He looked agitated. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds. The 2 other men were wearing dark windbreakers. They looked like rough trade ex-military or cartel muscle. They were not lawyers. They were cleaners. My blood ran cold. This was not a legal meeting. This was a hostile extraction. They were not there to protect Rebecca. They were there to ensure she followed through. I flew the drone closer, landing it silently on the roof of the porch, just above the open window of the living room. I activated the directional microphone. The audio crackled into my earpiece. "Sign the damn papers," Rebecca Adrian's voice hissed. "We do not have time for cold feet. I cannot do it with them watching," Rebecca's voice replied, trembling. "Who are these guys, Adrian?" "You said it would just be us. Insurance," Adrian said. "In case your husband decides to show up. Or in case you decide to get sentimental. Now sign the affidavit. It grants full custody to your mother in the event of Thomas's arrest." "I do not want to give custody to my mother," Rebecca argued. "I want custody," Adrian laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. You are an accessory to corporate espionage, darling. If this goes south, you are going to prison too. Your mother is the only one with a clean record. She gets the girl. You get the money." That was the deal. I saw Rebecca on the screen. She backed away, her hands shaking. She looked at the 2 thugs. One of them cracked his knuckles, a sound that popped clearly over the microphone. "This isn't what we agreed on," she whispered. "The deal has changed," Adrian said, stepping closer to her. His voice dropped to a menacing growl. "Thomas is smarter than we thought. He rigged the company computer. He has logs. We need to end this today. Once you sign that, my associates here will go pay Thomas a visit. They will make sure he resists arrest. When the police get there, it will be self-defense." I stopped breathing. They were not just going to frame me. They were going to kill me. They were going to send these hitmen to my house to stage a violent struggle and murder me, claiming I attacked them. And Rebecca, my wife, looked horrified, but she was picking up the pen. Fear was a powerful motivator. I could not wait for the police. Even if I called them now, it would take them 20 minutes to get out here. By then, Rebecca would have signed, and Adrian might have hurt her, or Lily, just to keep them quiet. I had to act. I had to turn their safe house into a haunted house. I opened my laptop. I connected to the villa's Wi-Fi network. I had the password. I was the one who installed the system 5 years ago. I still had the admin root access. I bypassed the firewall and gained control of the smart home hub. I had access to everything: the lights, the locks, the thermostat, and, most importantly, the integrated Sonos sound system that had speakers in every room, including the hidden subwoofers in the floorboards. I opened my file of recordings. I had gigabytes of audio. The teddy bear recordings, the phone intercepts, the watch recordings. I selected a specific track, a compilation I had edited together on the ride over. I called it The Ghost of Truth. I cranked the volume on the system master control to 100%. I hit play. Inside the house, the silence was shattered by a deafening feedback squeal that made Adrian and the thugs wince and cover their ears. Then the voice boomed out. It was not music. It was Evelyn Sterling's voice, clear, crisp, and magnified to a terrifying volume. "He is becoming difficult about the stock transfer. We need to increase the dosage. He needs to be compliant." Rebecca dropped the pen. She spun around, looking at the ceiling, looking at the walls. "What is that?" she screamed. Adrian looked around wildly. "Who is doing that? Turn it off." The audio shifted. It was Adrian's voice, now recorded from his car conversation with Rebecca. "We have to resolve him before Friday. Friday is his birthday. $40 million. The thugs looked at Adrian. They looked uneasy. They were paid to rough up a husband, not to be part of a conspiracy that was being broadcasted. Adrian pulled out a gun, a real gun. A silver semi-automatic. He aimed it at the ceiling speakers. "Shut it up," he roared. I watched on the monitor. He was losing control. Good. I switched tracks. I played the recording from the teddy bear, the one from the night of the party. If he has a breakdown, we get everything. The house, the trust, the girl. Then I played the sound of Rebecca hitting herself with the candlestick. The wet thud of metal on flesh, followed by her calculated silence. Thud. Thud. Rebecca fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Stop it, Thomas. I know you are here. Stop it." I did not stop. I integrated the lighting system. I set the lights to strobe rapidly, creating a disorienting epileptic nightmare. The house flashed violently between blinding white and pitch black. I spoke into my headset, projecting my voice through the God mic feature of the system. My voice boomed through the house, distorted and deep like the voice of judgment itself. "Get away from my daughter, Adrian." Adrian spun around, aiming the gun at the windows. "Show yourself, you coward." One of the thugs moved toward the back door. "I cannot deal with this," he shouted over the noise. "This is a setup." He tried to open the door. It was locked. I had engaged the electronic deadbolts. "Nobody leaves," my voice thundered. "The police are on their way. The FBI has the live stream. You are all already dead men." It was a bluff. The FBI was not watching this specific feed yet, but they did not know that. Adrian grabbed Rebecca by the hair, hauling her up. "Where is he? Where is he hiding, Daddy?" Lily screamed from the kitchen. The sound of my daughter's scream tore through me. The game was over. I could not stay in the woods anymore. I hit the command to unlock the front door only. "Run, Rebecca," I said through the speakers. "Take Lily and run." Adrian pointed the gun at the kitchen doorway. No, the lights went black. Completely black. I cut the main breaker via the software. In the sudden darkness, chaos erupted. I heard furniture crashing. I heard Adrian firing a shot blindly into the wall. I abandoned the laptop. I sprinted down the ridge, tearing through the brambles, moving toward the house. I had no gun. I had no weapon other than a tire iron I had pulled from my bike. But I had the element of surprise, and I had the rage of a father who had just heard his child scream. I reached the porch. The front door was ajar, just as I had programmed. I slipped inside. The house was pitch black, filled with the smell of gunpowder and fear. I heard heavy breathing to my left. One of the thugs. I swung the tire iron with all my strength, aiming for where the breathing was. It connected with a sickening crunch, a kneecap. The man went down howling. I moved toward the kitchen. I could hear Lily sobbing. "I am coming, baby," I whispered to myself. "Daddy is here." But as I stepped into the hallway, the emergency backup lights flickered on dim, yellow, ghostly lights, powered by the generator. And there, at the end of the hall, was Adrian. He had one arm around Rebecca's neck, choking her. With his other hand, he held the gun pressed against Lily's temple. Lily's eyes were wide, filled with a terror that no 8-year-old should ever know. "Drop it!" Thomas Adrian screamed. His face twisted into a mask of pure insanity. "Drop the bar or I will paint the wall with her." I froze. The tire iron slipped from my fingers and clanged onto the hardwood floor. I raised my hands. "You win, Adrian." I said, my voice calm, deadly calm. "Let them go. This is between you and me." Adrian smiled, but there was no humor in it. It was the smile of a man who knew he had gone too far to turn back. "Oh, no, Thomas," he said. "It is not between us. It is between you and the floor. Kneel down." I slowly sank to my knees. "You are a smart man," Thomas Adrian sneered. "But you forgot one thing. In the real world, the bad guys do not always lose. Sometimes they just rewrite the ending." He shifted his aim from Lily to me. I looked at Rebecca. Her face was bruised, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my wife. Not the conspirator, not the enemy, but the woman I had married looking at me with pure agonizing regret. "I am sorry," she mouthed. I tensed my muscles, calculating the distance. 15 feet. Too far. If I moved, he would shoot. I needed a miracle, or I needed the one variable Adrian had not accounted for. Suddenly, a high-pitched siren began to wail from Lily's wrist. She had pressed the panic button on the watch I gave her. Adrian flinched, distracted by the sudden noise coming from the girl's arm. "What the hell is that?" he shouted, looking down at her wrist. "That split second was all I needed." "Now, Rebecca!" I roared. Rebecca did not think. She acted on instinct. She drove her elbow backward, driving it into Adrian's solar plexus with every ounce of strength she had left. Adrian doubled over, gasping, the gun wavering. I launched myself from the floor like a coiled spring. I covered the 15 feet in a heartbeat. I tackled Adrian, driving my shoulder into his chest, slamming him into the wall. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. I felt a searing heat graze my ribs, but I did not stop. I grabbed his wrist, twisting it until I heard the snap of bone. The gun clattered to the floor. I rained punches down on him. Left, right, left. I hit him for the lies. I hit him for the drugs. I hit him for the bear. I hit him for my daughter. I only stopped when I felt a small hand grabbing my shirt. "Daddy, stop, Daddy!" I froze my fist, raised in the air, my knuckles bloody. Adrian was unconscious beneath me, his face a ruin. I looked up. Lily was standing there shaking. Rebecca was huddled in the corner, holding the gun, pointing it at the two thugs who were slowly backing away with their hands up. I stood up, breathing hard. I walked over to Lily and scooped her up into my arms. She buried her face in my neck, sobbing. "It is okay," I whispered, stroking her hair. "The monster is sleeping. It is over." I looked at Rebecca. She lowered the gun, her hands trembling so hard she almost dropped it. She looked at me, waiting for me to yell, to scream, to condemn her. I did not say a word. I just nodded toward the door. Sirens. Real sirens this time. I could hear them in the distance, getting louder. The police were coming, and this time I had the recordings, I had the gun, and I had the truth. But as I looked at the carnage in the hallway, I knew the war was not over. We had won the battle, but the general was still out there. Evelyn Sterling was still sitting in her mansion, drinking tea, waiting for a phone call that would never come. I walked out onto the porch, carrying my daughter, the cold night air filling my lungs. "I am coming for you, Evelyn," I whispered into the darkness. "And I am bringing the storm with me." The victory I tasted on the porch was sweet, but it was premature. I should have known that a man like Adrian Miller, a man who had built his entire career on crushing others without mercy, would not stay down just because of a few broken bones. I should have remembered that a cornered rat is dangerous, but a cornered rat with a team of paid mercenaries is lethal. As I stood there, breathing in the cold night air, holding Lily, the silence was shattered, not by sirens but by a guttural roar from behind me. One of the thugs I had thought subdued had lunged at Rebecca, knocking the gun from her trembling hands. It skittered across the floorboards and vanished into the darkness of the shrubbery. In the same chaotic second, the second mercenary slammed his shoulder into my back, sending me sprawling down the porch steps. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I scrambled to shield Lily, twisting my body so I landed on the wet gravel, taking the brunt of the fall. "Run, Lily, run to the woods," I gasped, trying to push her away. But she was frozen, paralyzing terror, locking her small limbs. Adrian stumbled out of the house. He was bleeding from the nose and favoring his left leg, but his eyes were wide with a manic chemical desperation. He did not look at me. He looked at the driveway. "Get the girl," he screamed at the mercenaries. "We need leverage." The larger man grabbed Lily by the waist, lifting her off the ground as she kicked and screamed. My vision blurred with red rage. I tried to stand, but a boot connected with my ribs, sending a fresh wave of agony through my chest. Adrian limped toward the black SUV. "Throw her in the back. We are leaving now." Rebecca screamed, running from the house. She threw herself at Adrian, clawing at his face. "Let her go. You cannot take her." Adrian back, handed her with a brutal, dismissive force, sending her crumbling to the gravel. "You chose your side, Rebecca. Now stay there and rot." The sky, which had been threatening violence all day, finally broke open. It did not just rain. The heavens collapsed. A torrential downpour swept across the estate, instantly soaking everything, turning the dust to mud, and blurring the world into streaks of gray and black. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the ground. I watched through the curtain of rain as they threw my daughter into the back seat of the SUV. Adrian jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the storm like searchlights. I forced myself up. My body was screaming, but my mind had engaged a cold binary focus. Pain was just a signal. I chose to ignore it. I did not run after the car. I could not outrun a V8 engine. Instead, I reached into my tactical vest and pulled out my phone. During my time at the house while hacking the smart home system, I had also scanned the local Bluetooth and Wi-Fi spectrum for vehicle telematics. I knew Adrian drove a top-of-the-line model, a car loaded with convenience features that were essentially open doors for someone like me. I had cloned the digital key fob signature 20 minutes ago, just in case. The SUV tires spun in the mud, throwing dirt into the air, as Adrian floored the accelerator, heading for the main gate. I swiped my thumb across the screen. Execute protocol lockdown. I was not just an engineer. I was a systems architect. I knew that modern cars are just computers on wheels, and every computer has an administrative override. As the SUV reached the end of the driveway, gaining speed, I sent the packet command. It was not a brute force shutoff that would cause a crash. It was a precise surgical strike on the engine control unit. The brake lights of the SUV flared bright red, illuminating the falling rain. The car skidded slightly on the wet leaves, then lurched to a halt. Adrian revved the engine. I could hear the RPM spiking the engine, whining in protest, but the transmission had disengaged. I had shifted the car remotely into neutral and locked the gearbox. Then, I hit the second command child safety lock. Engage. Master lock. Engage. The doors clicked audibly. The windows rolled up tight. Adrian was trapped in a 2-ton steel cage of his own purchasing. I began to walk toward the car. The rain plastered my hair to my skull and washed the blood from my knuckles. I walked slowly, deliberately. I saw Adrian inside, pounding on the steering wheel, screaming silently behind the soundproof glass. He pulled the door handle frantically. It would not budge. The 2 mercenaries in the back seat were trying to kick the windows out, but the laminated safety glass held firm. I stopped 10 feet from the hood of the car. The headlights illuminated me, a lone figure standing in the storm. I stared right at Adrian. I saw the realization dawn on his face. He was not fighting a man anymore. He was fighting a superior operating system. But the nightmare was not over. Headlights appeared at the top of the driveway. A second car. A sleek, silver limousine pulled up, splashing through the puddles, and screeched to a halt just behind Adrian's disabled SUV. The rear door opened. An umbrella unfolded, black and sharp. Evelyn Sterling stepped out. She was dressed in a pristine white trench coat that seemed to repel the mud and the filth of the situation. She looked at the scene, her lover trapped in the car, her daughter sobbing on the ground, her son-in-law standing like a sentinel in the rain, and she did not look afraid. She looked annoyed. She signaled to her driver, a massive man who looked more like a tank than a chauffeur. "Get the girl out of that car," Evelyn ordered, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "We are leaving. Adrian is a liability. We take the girl and we go to the airfield." The driver moved toward the SUV, raising a heavy crowbar to smash the window. I stepped forward. "Don't touch that car, Evelyn," she turned to me, her face a mask of icy disdain. "You are pathetic, Thomas. Do you really think you can stop us? I have judges in my pocket. I have senators on speed dial. You are a mentally unstable nobody who is about to be arrested for assaulting a prominent attorney." She gestured to her driver. "Break it." The driver swung the crowbar. The rear window shattered. Lily screamed. I sprinted. The driver turned to face me, raising the crowbar again. He was huge easily, 6'4". But I did not fight him. I slid on the wet grass, dropping low, and swept his legs with a precision kick to the back of the knee. He buckled. As he fell, I grabbed his wrist using his own momentum to twist the crowbar out of his hand. I stood up, breathing hard, holding the heavy iron bar. "Stay back!" I roared at Evelyn. She laughed. A cold, mirthless sound. "Or what Thomas you will hit an old woman. Go ahead. It will look wonderful on the police report." Inside the car, Adrian had managed to climb into the back seat. He grabbed Lily again, pulling a small knife from his boot. He held it to her throat. "Open the locks," Thomas, Adrian screamed through the shattered window. "Open them or I swear to God I will cut her." The standoff froze in the rain. Adrian with the knife, me with the crowbar, Evelyn watching with a sneer. I looked at the car. I could unlock it, but if I did, they would run. If I didn't, he might hurt her. Then I saw movement on the other side of the SUV, Rebecca. She had crawled through the mud. She was standing by the rear door on the passenger side, the side Adrian was not facing. She looked at me through the rain. Her face was swollen, her dress torn, her hair matted with blood and dirt. But her eyes were clear. She pointed to the door handle. She mouthed one word: "Open." I understood. I looked at Adrian. "Okay," I shouted. "I am unlocking it. Just do not hurt her." I tapped my phone. "Unlock. Rear passenger door only." The lock clicked. Adrian, distracted by my shout, looked at me. Rebecca yanked the door open. The wind and rain howled into the car. Rebecca screamed. "Run!" She reached in, grabbing Adrian's arm, the one holding the knife, and bit down on his wrist with the ferocity of a mother wolf. Adrian howled in pain, dropping the knife. Lily scrambled out of the car, tumbling into the mud. "Go to Daddy," Rebecca shrieked, throwing her body into the car to block Adrian from following. Lily scrambled up and ran. She ran through the rain, her small feet splashing in the puddles. I dropped the crowbar and fell to my knees, opening my arms. She collided with me, shivering and sobbing. I wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her wet hair, shielding her from the world. "I have you," I whispered, tears mixing with the rain on my face. "I have you," behind us. Adrian shoved Rebecca out of the car and scrambled out, picking up the knife again. He looked wild, unhinged. He started to charge toward us. "Freeze, federal agents." The voice was amplified, booming from the darkness of the tree line. Floodlights blinded us. Red and blue strobe lights erupted from every direction, piercing the gloom of the storm. Dozens of armored figures emerged from the woods, weapons drawn. The letters FBI were emblazoned in yellow on their chests. Adrian skidded to a halt, the knife slipping from his wet fingers. He looked around, bewildered. Agent Ross stepped into the light, his weapon trained on Adrian's chest. "Drop it, Miller," on the ground. Now Adrian slowly raised his hands, his face crumbling from rage to shock. He fell to his knees in the mud. Evelyn did not move. She stood by her limousine, smoothing her coat, watching the agents swarm the property with an expression of mild inconvenience. 2 agents grabbed Adrian, cuffing him roughly. 2 more secured the mercenaries. Agent Ross walked over to Evelyn. "Evelyn Sterling, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and federal wire fraud." Evelyn scoffed, pulling her arm away as an agent reached for her. "Do not touch me. This is ridiculous. My son-in-law is a paranoid schizophrenic. This is all a delusion he concocted. I have the medical records to prove it. You are making a mistake that will cost you your badge, agent." She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with malicious confidence. "Tell them, Thomas. Tell them about the voices." The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The silence returned heavy and tense. I stood up, lifting Lily into my arms. I walked over to where Evelyn stood surrounded by agents. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof flash drive. "There are no voices, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady. "But there are recordings." I handed the drive to Agent Ross. "What is this?" Ross asked. "Protocol Willow," I said. Evelyn's face went pale for the first time. I continued, locking eyes with her. "It contains the raw video footage from inside Dr. Thorne's office at Willow Creek, 4 months ago, the day you handed him a briefcase containing $50,000 in cash to falsify Arthur's diagnosis." Evelyn flinched, as if I had slapped her. "You couldn't," she stammered. "I had that office swept for bugs." "You swept for microphones," I corrected her. "You did not sweep for the optical sensor in the grandfather clock your husband gave to the doctor as a gift." "I built that clock, Evelyn. I have been recording every meeting in that office for a year." The color drained from her face completely. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind only the terrified, shriveled reality of a woman who realized she had lost. "I have you on tape admitting to the poisoning," I said. "I have you on tape planning the conservatorship, and I have you on tape joking about how long it would take for me to accidentally die once I was committed." I looked at Agent Ross. "It is all there. Every bite." Ross looked at Evelyn. He smiled a cold, satisfied smile. "That sounds like enough for a warrant to me," he said. "Cuff her." As the agents twisted Evelyn's arms behind her back, the click of the handcuffs sounded louder than the thunder. She started screaming, shrieking about her lawyers, about her rights, about her money. But nobody was listening. I turned away. I looked at Rebecca. She was sitting on the bumper of the ambulance that had just arrived, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked at me, then at Lily. She did not try to come over. She just lowered her head and wept. I walked toward the lead FBI SUV, holding my daughter tight. "Is it over, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Yes, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "The rain is stopping. Look." To the west, beneath the heavy clouds, a thin line of golden sunlight was breaking through the horizon. It was faint, but it was there. The storm had broken. And we were still standing. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of depositions and motions, but the day itself arrived with a terrifying clarity. The courtroom of the Cook County Superior Court was a cavern of mahogany and marble smelling of floor wax and old paper. It was a sterile theater, where lives were dismantled and repackaged into legal arguments. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Marcus King. My suit was pressed, my tie was straight, and my hands were folded calmly on the table. Across the aisle, the defense team looked like a battalion of sharks in Italian wool. Evelyn Sterling sat with a posture so rigid she looked like she was wearing a corset made of steel. Adrian Miller, his arm in a cast, and his face still showing the yellow-green remnants of bruising, refused to look at me. Rebecca sat behind them, separated by a distinct gap, looking small and ghostly pale. The stakes could not have been higher. This was a consolidated hearing. We were contesting the emergency conservatorship petition they had filed against me, and simultaneously the state was presenting the preliminary evidence for the conspiracy and attempted murder charges. The defense strategy was predictable but dangerous. They could not deny the events at the lake house, so they were attacking the foundation of the evidence. They were claiming I was a master manipulator, a tech genius who had fabricated a digital reality to frame a concerned mother-in-law and a diligent family attorney. Mr. Blackwood, the lead defense counsel hired by Evelyn's vast fortune, paced in front of the judge. He was a theatrical man with silver hair and a voice that projected false sincerity to the back row. "Your Honor," he boomed, gesturing toward me, "we are being asked to believe the fantastical story of a man who has been clinically diagnosed with paranoia. Mr. Brown is a senior software engineer with top-level security clearance. He builds simulations for a living. He creates things that do not exist. The defense contends that the audio recordings, the video footage, and even the digital logs from the car are not evidence of a crime. They are evidence of Mr. Brown's psychosis and his supreme technical skill. He has manufactured a conspiracy to destroy the people trying to save him. These are deepfakes, Your Honor. High-quality, spiteful fabrications. He paused for effect, looking at the gallery. We will prove that the only monster in this room is the man sitting right there, a man who hacked his own family to feed his delusions. A murmur went through the courtroom. It was a compelling narrative. In the age of artificial intelligence, seeing was no longer believing. Marcus leaned over to me. They are betting the farm on the technicality. They want to throw out the recordings. I nodded. Let them. I was called to the stand at 10 in the morning. I walked to the witness box. I swore the oath. I sat down. I looked directly at Judge Harrison, a no-nonsense woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Mr. Blackwood approached me like a hunter cornering prey. Mr. Brown, he began resting his hands on the railing. Is it true that you possess the skills to alter digital audio? Yes, I said calmly. Is it true you can modify video metadata? Yes. Is it true that you created a honeypot, a fake server to trick your wife? I created a defensive measure to protect national security data, I corrected him. But it was fake, was it not? Blackwood pressed. It was a simulation designed to deceive. Just like the voice of Mrs. Sterling in your so-called recordings. The recordings are authenticated, I said. Each file has a cryptographic hash sum that matches the chain of custody from the recording device to the FBI server. Blackwood smiled a shark-bearing teeth. And who wrote the code for those hash sums, Mr. Brown? Did you? I did, I admitted. So the fox built the henhouse and now tells us the chickens are safe. Blackwood scoffed. No further questions. He turned away, looking triumphant. He had planted the seed of doubt. If I wrote the code, I could have faked the verification. Marcus stood up for the redirect. He did not look worried. He looked like a man holding a royal flush. Mr. Brown, Marcus said. Did you write the code for the transactions in Mr. Adrian Miller's bank account? Objection, Blackwood shouted. Relevance goes to motive and credibility, Your Honor, Marcus said smoothly. The defense claims Mr. Miller is a victim of a frame-up. We intend to show he was a desperate man acting on financial necessity. Overruled, the judge said. Proceed. I pulled a document from my jacket pocket. It was not a digital file. It was a certified paper trail from the Cayman Islands Banking Authority, obtained through the FBI subpoena I had facilitated. No, I said. I did not write this code. This is a ledger from the Diamond Royale Online Casino. I opened the folder. Exhibit C. I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Mr. Adrian Miller has a gambling debt of $450,000. He has been defaulting on payments to loan sharks in Chicago for 6 months. I looked at Adrian. He had gone deathly pale. His good hand was gripping the table edge so hard his knuckles were white, and I continued, holding up a second sheet. Here is the transfer history from the Sterling Family Trust. On 3 separate occasions in the last 2 months, withdrawals of $50,000, $75,000, and $100,000 were made. They were labeled as legal retainers for Vanguard Legal, but they were transferred within minutes to the casino's holding company. I turned to the jury box. Adrian Miller was not protecting Evelyn Sterling. He was embezzling from her. He needed the $40 million from my trust fund, not just for greed, but because he has a price on his head. He was going to use my money to pay his debts after he locked me away. The courtroom erupted. Evelyn Sterling slowly turned her head to look at Adrian. Her expression was not one of anger. It was one of absolute shattering shock. She had thought she was the puppet master. She realized in that moment she was just the bankroll. "You stole from me," Evelyn whispered, her voice audible in the sudden silence. Adrian stared straight ahead, sweat beading on his forehead. Rebecca let out a sound, a sharp, strangled gasp. She looked at Adrian, then at her mother. The triangle of trust was dissolving in real time. Marcus let the moment hang in the air before moving to the next strike. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "to address the defense's claim that the audio is a deepfake, we would like to play Exhibit D. This is the recording retrieved from the device hidden inside the teddy bear. The defense claims Mr. Brown fabricated this dialogue. However, this recording contains details that only the conspirators could know." Mr. Blackwood tried to object, but the judge waved him down. "Play the tape." The audio system crackled to life. The voice of Evelyn Sterling filled the room. It was casual, lighthearted, the sound of a woman discussing a brunch menu, not a felony. "Evelyn, once he is in Willow Creek, how long until we can liquidate the portfolio?" "Adrian, 6 months. We have to wait for the competency hearing to clear, but we can access the liquid cash immediately." "Evelyn, good. I want to renovate the East Wing. And I am tired of looking at his hideous car in the driveway." "Adrian, I will take the car. Consider it a bonus." Evelyn laughing. "Just make sure Rebecca keeps her mouth shut. She is getting soft. If she cracks, we might have to arrange a room for her at the clinic, too." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Every eye in the room turned to Rebecca. She was trembling violently. Her face was wet with tears. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She choked out, looking at her mother. "You were going to lock me up too?" Evelyn did not look at her daughter. She stared at the table, her face a mask of stone. She knew the game was over. The deepfake defense could not explain away the specific intimate cruelty of that threat. No machine could replicate the exact cadence of a mother's disdain for her own child. "Sit down, Ms. Brown," the judge ordered gently. "I cannot," Rebecca sobbed. She turned to the judge. "It is true. All of it. I helped them. I planted the flash drive. I signed the papers. But I did not know they were going to hurt Thomas. I did not know about the money." She collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Mr. Blackwood looked defeated. He started packing his briefcase. There is no defense against a confession in open court. "But I had one final card to play. The ace in the hole," Your Honor, Marcus said. The plaintiff calls Dr. Eris Thorne to the stand. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Dr. Thorne walked in. He was not wearing his white coat. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed in front of him. A federal marshal walked beside him. Dr. Thorne had surrendered 3 days ago. When I sent him the video file from his own clock, I gave him a choice: go down for life as a co-conspirator, or turn state's evidence and keep his medical license eventually, after a 10-year stint in minimum security. He chose the latter. Dr. Thorne took the stand. He looked small, stripped of his authority and arrogance. Dr. Thorne, Marcus asked, "Did you accept a bribe from Evelyn Sterling?" "Yes," Thorne said, his voice a whisper. "Please speak up," the judge commanded. "Yes," Thorne repeated. $50,000 cash. "And what was the service provided for that payment?" "I falsified the medical records of Arthur Sterling to justify his involuntary commitment," Thorne said. "And I was contracted to do the same for Thomas Brown." "Was Thomas Brown ever your patient?" Marcus asked. "No." "Did you ever examine him?" "No." "So your diagnosis of paranoia was based on what it was, based on the instructions from Mrs. Sterling," Thorne said. "She provided the narrative. I provided the stamp." "And the plan for Mr. Brown once he was admitted?" Marcus asked. Thorne hesitated. He looked at me. There was fear in his eyes. "We were to administer a high-dose regimen of antipsychotics and sedatives," he said. "The goal was to induce a state of permanent cognitive decline. He would never have been able to testify or manage his own affairs again. It is a procedure we call chemical lobotomy. A collective gasp went through the gallery. The brutality of it was staggering. It was not just theft. It was the murder of a mind. I looked at Evelyn. She was finally showing emotion. Her hands were shaking. She was looking at the exit sign as if calculating the distance. "Thank you, Dr. Thorne," Marcus said. The judge slammed her gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She looked at the defense table with eyes that burned with righteous fury. "I have heard enough," Judge Harrison said. Her voice was trembling with suppressed rage. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen greed, and I have seen violence. But I have never seen such a calculated, cold-blooded dismantling of a human being by his own family." She turned to Evelyn Sterling. "Evelyn Sterling, you are a predator. You devoured your husband and you attempted to devour your son-in-law. The court finds the petition for conservatorship not only meritless, but fraudulent. It is dismissed with prejudice." She turned to the bailiffs. "Take Mrs. Sterling and Mr. Miller into custody immediately. Bail is revoked. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for additional charges of racketeering and kidnapping." As the bailiffs moved in, the veneer of high society cracked completely. Evelyn stood up screaming, "You cannot do this! I am Evelyn Sterling. I own this town. That recording is a fake. It is a fake." She was still screaming as they handcuffed her. She looked at me one last time as they dragged her toward the side door. Her eyes were wide, feral, stripped of all humanity. "I will ruin you, Thomas. You will never see a dime." I just watched her go. I felt nothing. No triumph. No joy. Just a deep, exhausting relief. Adrian Miller did not scream. He went quietly. His head hung low, defeated by his own gambling addiction and the woman who had exploited it. Rebecca remained at the table, sobbing quietly. She was not arrested. Not yet. Her cooperation would be handled separately. But she had lost everything. Her lover, her mother, her husband, and her daughter. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Brown," she said, her voice softening, "the court owes you an apology. The system failed you. But today the system worked because you made it work. You are free to go. The protective order for your daughter is granted indefinitely." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I stood up. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was filled with reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in my face. "Mr. Brown, how do you feel? Is it true about the $40 million? Will you let your wife see your daughter?" I ignored them all. I walked through the crowd, my eyes fixed on the exit doors where the sunlight was streaming in. Marcus walked beside me, shielding me from the press. "You did it," Thomas, Marcus said quietly. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected him. I walked out onto the steps of the courthouse. The air was crisp and clean. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 6 months, I did not feel watched. I did not feel hunted. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message waiting. It was from the encrypted server I had set up for Lily's watch. Status safe. Location, Aunt Sarah's house. I smiled. I walked down the steps, past the news vans, past the chaos. I had a daughter to pick up, and for the first time in a long time, I had a future that belonged only to us. The empire of lies had fallen. The architecture of betrayal had collapsed, and from the rubble I would build something new, something real. I got into my car, a rental, anonymous and secure, and drove away. I did not look back at the courthouse. Justice had been served, but justice was just paperwork. The real victory was the empty seat in the back of my car, waiting to be filled by the only person who mattered. The aftermath of the trial did not feel like a victory parade. It felt like walking through the smoking ruins of a city that had been bombed into submission. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the investigation and the confrontation had faded, replaced by a dull, aching exhaustion. But alongside the fatigue, there was a grim satisfaction in watching the house of Sterling turn into dust. The first domino to fall after the verdict was the darkest secret of them all. During the FBI's raid on Evelyn's estate, they found more than just financial records. Hidden in a locked safe in her vanity, they discovered a collection of antique vials. The toxicology reports came back 3 days after the trial. For 5 years, Evelyn had been dosing my father-in-law, Arthur, with small, undetectable amounts of thallium. It was a slow-acting heavy metal poison that mimicked the symptoms of dementia and fatigue. She had not just stolen his company. She had stolen his mind day by day, teaspoon by teaspoon. The realization turned my stomach, but it also vindicated everything I had done. We were not dealing with a greedy socialite. We were dealing with a sociopath. On a Tuesday morning under a sky that was finally clear of rain, I drove to Willow Creek. The facility was under new management appointed by the state after the arrest of Dr. Thorne. The staff, once arrogant and dismissive, walked on eggshells around me. They knew I was the man who had brought down their chief of staff. I walked into room 304. Arthur was sitting by the window looking at the birds. He was thin, frail, and his hair had gone completely white. But when he turned to look at me, the fog that had obscured his eyes for the last year was gone. The detoxification protocol I had demanded had worked. "Thomas," he said. His voice was raspy, unused, but it was steady. "Arthur," I replied, fighting back the lump in my throat. "I am here to take you home." He stood up, his legs shaking slightly. I rushed to support him, but he waved me off. He needed to do this on his own. "Is she gone?" Arthur asked. He did not need to say her name. "She is gone, Arthur. She is never coming back." He nodded slowly. A single tear tracked through the deep lines of his face. "I loved her once, you know, before the money ate her soul. We walked out of that place together. I did not take him to my house. I took him to a quiet assisted living apartment I had rented for him, one with a garden and no cameras. He was ready to testify. In fact, he was eager. The deposition he gave the following week was the final nail in Evelyn's coffin. He detailed the coercion, the forced signatures, and the strange bitter taste of the tea she insisted on making him every evening. While Arthur was rediscovering his freedom, the legal system was dismantling the conspirators with ruthless efficiency. Adrian Miller stood before the disciplinary board of the Bar Association exactly 10 days after the trial. I was there sitting in the back row. He looked like a ghost of the man who had sneered at me in the rain. His arm was in a sling, and his expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. The ruling was swift. Permanent disbarment. He would never practice law again. But that was just the appetizer. The criminal sentencing hearing followed 2 days later. Because of his prior gambling debts and the undeniable evidence of kidnapping and extortion, the judge showed no mercy. 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 12. I watched as the bailiffs led him away. He looked back, once scanning the room, perhaps looking for Rebecca, or perhaps looking for me. Our eyes met. I did not smile. I simply nodded. It was a nod of acknowledgement that the balance sheet had finally been zeroed out. He had gambled his life on destroying mine, and he had lost. Rebecca's fate was more complicated and in many ways more tragic. She had cooperated in the final hours, and her testimony against her mother had been crucial in securing the additional attempted murder charges. Because of this, and because she had no prior criminal record, her lawyer managed to negotiate a plea deal. She received a suspended sentence of 5 years probation. She would not go to prison. But the family court judge was less forgiving. I sat across from her in the mediation room a week later. She looked broken. The glamour was gone. She was wearing off-the-rack clothes, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, no makeup, to hide the dark circles under her eyes. "The judgment is final, Rebecca," I said, sliding the papers across the table. "Sole legal and physical custody to me. You have no visitation rights for 6 months. After that, we can discuss supervised visits, pending a psychological evaluation." She touched the papers, her hand trembling. "Thomas, please. She is my daughter, too." I was scared. "Adrian said he would kill you if I did not help." "You had a choice, Rebecca," I said, my voice cold. "You could have told me. We could have fought them together. Instead, you drugged me. You gaslit me. You let them put a camera in a teddy bear to spy on an 8-year-old girl. You broke the one rule of parenting: you protect the child. You failed." She began to weep, silent, shuddering sobs. "I lost everything, Thomas. The money is gone, the house is gone. I am living in a studio apartment. I am working as a receptionist. You are alive," I said, standing up. "And you are free. That is more than you planned for me." I walked out. I felt no joy in her suffering. It was just a necessary tragedy. She had to be removed from Lily's life like a cancerous tumor. It hurt to cut her out, but leaving her in would have been fatal. The financial fallout was the final act of this destruction. The investigation revealed that the sterling fortune was a house of cards. Evelyn had been leveraging assets to pay off debts from previous fraudulent schemes, a Ponzi scheme of real estate and high-interest loans. When the government seized her assets, the house of cards collapsed. The mansion on the lake, the estate where I had almost died, was foreclosed upon. The bank seized it, along with the contents. The Mercedes, the art, the jewelry. It was all auctioned off to pay back the investors Evelyn had swindled over the decade. I drove past the main Sterling residence one afternoon. The gates were chained shut. A large seized property sign was zip-tied to the iron bars. The lawn was already overgrown. It looked small. Without the aura of fear and money, it was just a pile of bricks. That evening, I sat in my study, the Binary Fortress. The room was quiet. The hum of the servers was gone. I had shut them down. I did not need a surveillance state anymore. On my desk, under the warm glow of a lamp, lay the teddy bear. I had dissected it completely. The chocolate-colored fur was piled to one side. The stuffing was in a trash bag. The mechanical skeleton, the servos, the battery packs, the wires lay, spread out like the anatomy of a dead cyborg. And there in the center was the glass eye, the lens. I picked it up, rolling the cold glass between my fingers. It was such a small thing, a piece of technology no bigger than a marble. Yet it had almost destroyed 3 generations of a family. I looked at the scattered parts. This bear was supposed to be a symbol of love. Instead, it was a Trojan horse. It was the physical manifestation of the lie I had been living. I had thought I was marrying into a family. I had actually married into a corporation that viewed me as a liability to be liquidated. I felt a profound sense of loss. Not for the money I had secured, my own inheritance, and Lily's future, but for the time. The years I spent trying to impress Evelyn. The years I spent trying to make Rebecca happy. It was all wasted energy poured into a black hole. But as I sat there, a thought occurred to me. It wasn't wasted. It was the forge. The fire had burned away the naive, trusting Thomas Brown. The man who sat in the chair now was harder, yes, but he was also unbreakable. I had survived. I had outsmarted them. Revenge, I realized, was not about seeing them in handcuffs. That was just justice. Revenge was the fact that I was sitting here in my own home, drinking a cup of coffee, completely and utterly free. They were in cages, some literal, some financial, some emotional. I was the only one who could walk out the front door and go wherever I pleased. The door to the study creaked open. I turned. Lily was standing there, in her pajamas, holding a new stuffed animal, a simple floppy dog I had bought her at the drugstore. No cameras, no chips, just cotton and fabric. "Daddy," she asked softly. "Hey, Bug," I said, swiveling my chair. "What are you doing up? I had a bad dream," she said. She walked over and climbed onto my lap. She looked at the mess on the desk. "Is that the bad bear?" "Yes," I said. "It is broken now. It can't hurt anyone." She poked at the pile of wires. "Daddy, why did Grandma and Mommy do that? Why did they want to hurt us?" It was the question I had been dreading. How do you explain greed to an 8-year-old? How do you explain that some people have a hole inside them that no amount of money can fill? I wrapped my arms around her, resting my chin on the top of her head. I looked at the disassembled bear, searching for the right words. "Sweetie," I said gently, "you know how sometimes in school there are kids who want to win the game so badly that they cheat." She nodded against my chest. "Like Timmy when we play tag. He says he wasn't tagged even when he was." "Exactly," I said. "Grandma and Mommy wanted to win the game of life. They wanted the biggest house and the most money. But they forgot the rules. They thought that winning was the only thing that mattered, so they started to cheat. They thought that if they broke the rules, they could get everything faster." "But that is wrong," Lily whispered. "It is very wrong," I agreed. "Because when you cheat to get things, you do not really own them. You are always afraid someone will find out. You are always looking over your shoulder. That is not a happy way to live." I picked up the glass eye and held it up to the light. "They built a whole world based on lies, Lily. They built a castle out of sand. And when the storm came, it all washed away." I dropped the eye into the trash bin. It made a final hollow clink. "We are different," I said, looking into her eyes. "We do things the hard way. We tell the truth even when it is scary. We work for what we have. And because of that, no one can ever take it away from us. That is what integrity means. It means you are strong on the inside, like a rock, not like a sandcastle." Lily thought about this for a moment. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "So we are the rocks?" she asked. I smiled, kissing her forehead. "Yes, baby, we are the rocks. And the storm is over." She leaned back against me, her breathing slowing down as she relaxed. "I am glad you are my daddy," she mumbled, her eyes closing. "You are the smartest rock." I laughed, a genuine warm sound that felt foreign in my throat, after months of tension. I turned off the desk lamp. The room plunged into darkness, save for the moonlight streaming in through the window. It illuminated the trash can where the pieces of the bear lay. I stood up, carrying my daughter out of the room. I closed the door on the binary fortress. I did not need a fortress anymore. I had a home. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking familiarly under my feet. Tomorrow I would call a contractor. I was going to sell this house. There were too many ghosts here, too many hidden cameras in the walls, even if they were disconnected. We would move, maybe to the coast, maybe to the mountains, somewhere with big skies and no fences. I had the trust fund, now $40 million, but I knew with absolute certainty that the true wealth was the sleeping weight in my arms. I tucked Lily into her bed. I checked the window locked. I checked the smoke detector, just a smoke detector. I sat in the chair by her bed, the same chair where the bear had once sat. But now the chair was occupied by a father who would never blink, never look away, and never let anyone harm her again. I watched her sleep for a long time. The nightmare was over. The empire of lies had crumbled, and in the silence of the night I finally found the peace I had been fighting for. The story was done. The truth had been told. And Thomas Brown was finally truly awake. You think you know how this story ends. You think you have seen the hero triumph the villains in chains and the sunset closing in on a healed family. You think that luck was on my side that night in the basement when I decided to scan the teddy bear. You think it was a coincidence that I had the right tools, the right software, and the right mindset to catch a master spy like Evelyn Sterling in the act. But if you believe that, then you have not been paying attention. There is one final file I need to open for you. One last directory in the database of my life that I have kept encrypted until this very moment. It is the truth behind the truth. I did not discover the conspiracy on the night of Lily's birthday. I did not stumble upon the plot when I saw the glass eye glinting in the sun. I knew about it 2 years ago. It started the day they took Arthur away. I was the one who packed his suitcase. While Evelyn was downstairs feigning tears for the paramedics, I was upstairs in his study, backing up his personal computer. Arthur had been slipping, yes, but he had moments of lucid terror. He had whispered to me once during a Sunday dinner that his tea tasted like bitter almonds. I ran a background script on his blood work reports, the ones Evelyn kept hidden. I saw the elevated heavy metal levels. I saw the pattern. I knew then that she was killing him. And I knew that once he was out of the way, she would turn her gaze toward me. I was the only obstacle left between her and total control of the family trust. But I was an engineer. I dealt in logic and proofs, in verifiable data. I could not go to the police with a hunch and a hacked blood test. Evelyn Sterling owned the police commissioner. She owned the judges. If I struck at her and missed, she would destroy me. She would take Lily. She would bury me so deep in the legal system that I would never see the light of day. So I made a choice. A cold, calculated choice that still haunts me on sleepless nights. I decided to let it happen. I decided to become the perfect victim. I knew they needed to frame me. I knew they needed evidence of my insanity. So I gave them a canvas to paint on. That obsession with vintage toys and animatronics, I planted that. 6 months before Lily's birthday, I started browsing specific forms on my iPad, knowing that Rebecca's account was linked to the family cloud. I started talking loudly near our smart home devices about how much I loved classic surveillance aesthetic and mechanical bears. I fed the algorithm. I fed their spies. I practically drew them a blueprint of exactly what kind of gift would trigger my paranoia. I knew Evelyn would take the bait. She was arrogant. She thought she was the cat playing with a mouse. She never realized that the mouse had built the maze. The teddy bear was not a surprise. It was a delivery I had been tracking since the moment she ordered the base model from a custom toy shop in Zurich. When I saw it on the lawn that day, when I felt that chill go down my spine, it was not fear. It was anticipation. It was the feeling of a trap finally snapping shut. I had to endure the drugs. I had to endure the humiliation of the party. I had to watch my wife, the woman I once loved, slowly betray me day by day. That was the hardest part. Acting surprised when Rebecca gaslit me. Pretending to be confused when the keys went missing. I had to break my own heart every single morning just to keep the performance convincing. But it was necessary. To catch a predator, you must bleed. You must look like dying prey. I sat in my study one last time, looking at the empty space where the bear had been. The room felt lighter, but also emptier. The game was over. The chessboard was cleared. I had one final loose end to tie up. I met Rebecca 2 days before she was scheduled to begin her probation service. She was moving out of her temporary apartment, packing the few boxes of clothes she had left. She looked at me when I walked in. She looked tired, aged by a decade in the span of a month. "Why are you here, Thomas?" she asked, taping up a box. To gloat, "No," I said. "I came to give you this." I handed her a manila envelope. She frowned, taking it. "What is it?" "It is the invoice from the toy shop," I said. She opened it. She read the itemized list. Her eyes widened. Item 1, life-sized bear. Customization, removal of standard voice box. Installation of client-provided encrypted surveillance suite. Technician level 4 clearance. "Evelyn didn't buy a bear and then hide a camera in it," Rebecca, I said softly. "She had it built as a spy device from the factory floor. She spent $15,000 to turn a child's toy into a weapon." Rebecca stared at the paper. Her hands shook. "She told me she just wanted to check on Lily," Rebecca whispered. "She told me it was a nanny cam. She said she was worried you were drinking again." "She lied to you too, Becca," I said. "She played us all. You were not her partner. You were just another asset." Rebecca dropped the paper. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, covering her face. "I am sorry, Thomas," she choked out. "I am so sorry." "I know," I said. I turned to leave. I did not offer forgiveness. Forgiveness was a luxury I could not afford yet. But I offered her the truth. And maybe for her that was enough. "Goodbye, Rebecca," I said. She did not answer. She just sat there weeping in the ruins of her life. The final act of cleansing happened on a Saturday morning. The sky was that piercing, impossible blue, again, the same color it had been on the day of the party. I took Lily to the shores of Lake Michigan. We walked out onto a concrete pier, the waves crashing against the pilings below us, sending sprays of cold mist into the air. I held the two glass eyes in my hand. They were heavy, cold, and dead. Lily looked at them. "Are those the bad eyes?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She took one. I held the other. "On the count of 3, I asked. 1, she said. 2, I said. 3, we shouted together. We threw them as hard as we could. They arched through the air, catching the sunlight for one brief, glittering second, and then vanished into the dark, churning water. Gone. We stood there for a long time watching the waves. The lake was vast, indifferent, and beautiful. It swallowed secrets and kept them. When we got back to the car, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. Thomas Brown speaking. "This is Marcus Vance, the director at Aerodynamics." I paused. The man who had suspended me. The man who had been a pawn in Evelyn's game. "Mr. Vance," I said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Look," Thomas Vance said, his voice hurried and nervous. "The board has reviewed the situation. We have seen the FBI reports. We know you were set up. We know you protected the data." And I asked. "We want you back," Vance said. "We want to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, complete autonomy, a 50% raise, and a formal apology from the board." I looked at Lily in the passenger seat. She was drawing on the foggy window with her finger. I smiled. "I appreciate the offer, Marcus," I said. "But I think my price has gone up." "Name it," Vance said instantly. "Double the salary," I said. "And I want a seat on the board." And Vance. "Yes. If you ever question my integrity again, I will not just quit." "I will take the source code with me." "Done," Vance said. "When can you start?" "Monday," I said. I hung up. I started the car. The engine purred. We drove home. Not to the house of cameras, but to a new house I had bought in the country. A place with wood fires and no internet-connected refrigerators. As we walked up the porch steps, I saw a package sitting on the doormat. It was wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Just my name handwritten in a script that looked vaguely familiar. Spidery, elegant, old-fashioned. I stopped. Lily ran ahead to the door. "What is that Daddy A present?" "Stay back, Lily," I said, my voice sharp. I walked over to the package. I did not pick it up. I pulled out my pocket knife and carefully slit the tape. I opened the flaps. Inside was a single vintage pocket watch. It was ticking loudly. And a note. "Time is a circle, Thomas. Tick-tock." It was Evelyn's handwriting. Sent from prison, smuggled out. Or maybe arranged months ago. A dead man's switch meant to haunt me. I looked at the watch. It was beautiful. It was expensive. I picked up the entire box. I did not bring it inside. I walked around to the backyard where the stone fire pit was. I threw the box into the pit. I doused it with lighter fluid. I struck a match. The flames roared up, consuming the paper, the cardboard, and the note. The watch sat in the center of the fire, the heat warping the metal, the glass face cracking, the ticking sound, swallowed by the crackle of the flames. I watched it burn until it was nothing but ash and twisted metal. I was not afraid. I was not haunted. I went inside. Lily was in the kitchen pouring milk. "Who was it from?" she asked. "Nobody," I said. "Just junk mail." I sat down at the table. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. In this century, information is a weapon. They tried to use it to kill me. They tried to record my life, edit my reality, and delete my existence. But they forgot one thing. Information can be manipulated. Data can be faked. But the truth is a physical force. It is the rock that breaks the scissors. It is the water that rusts the machine. I am Thomas Brown. I am a father. I am a survivor. And I have lived to tell the story. But as the screen fades to black and you sit there, in the safety of your home, I have one question for you. You have heard my story. You have seen the monsters that hide behind smiling faces. Do you trust the person sitting next to you right now? Are you sure? Go upstairs. Walk into your child's room. Pick up that teddy bear they love so much. Look into its eyes. Does it blink? Check your child's teddy bear tonight. Screen fades to black. The sound of Lily laughing echoes in the wind, soft, innocent, and terrifyingly clear. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I want to connect and share thoughts with all of you. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the Calm Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people. Stay safe and stay vigilant.